Right, good evening. Hopefully you hear me loud and clear with this one and this very lovely evening. So nice to be sat in here, to be honest. I've got everything set up. This is totally new for me as well, the way I'm doing this. I seem to be doing a new way each time, but hopefully this will work quite nicely for us. We've got the new chat system up. Been talking to you guys this evening in there already, so that is now live and streaming. That's a silly amount of airbrushes. It is, trust me, it's a long collection. It's like 20 years of airbrushingness. We'll be talking about all the different versions we got down here. We're not going to start properly till 8 o'clock, but what I want for you guys now, if you can just tell me in the live chat now how my sound is, if it's okay, if I'm quiet, if I'm loud, if it sounds terrible, and then I can literally pop round the other side, play with my little mixer and get it sorted. I am thinking for the live stuff I should have the camera facing that way so I can see a bit more. Good, sound is fine for me. Thank you very much, Daniel, that's great for that. Right, it looks like we've got around about 50 of us floating around here at the moment, which is really nice. We've got 43 of us watching live, so obviously you guys can make your way in. Usual thing, I think if you've watched tonight's show as well, I've shown you how to find us and everything else like that, so that's really nice. We've got loads of us that are joining us now in the chat. You're all flooding in, getting ready. I haven't done anything yet, I'm not starting, we're just preparing and going through everything just to make sure the sound is all good, because I'm doing this a little bit different to normal. And it is, and the sound is fine. Thank you, Andrew. Good evening, Andrew. Nice to have you here. You know, the whole point of doing these live things is to make them as interactive as possible as well. So, you know, as you say, if you've got any questions, if we can make them related to this, okay, I'm not going to be answering questions on general modelling and other things we've spoken about, because this is really going to be about airbrushing, okay? If this works well, we'll do a lot more with other things, quite frankly. It's sort of just a test thing. What I want to do, literally, over the next few weeks, is just go through airbrushing and get feedback from you guys, because when I do the live stuff with people in the studio, it's quite nice because they give me their problems that perhaps I've never even heard of, and it makes me think about it a little bit as well and can try and get it sorted and stuff like that. So, good evening, Jeremy, lovely to have you here as well, and Renee as well, lovely to have you here as well. Is there a way to turn the sound in the chat room off? Yes, right at the very top where it says chatting online, there's a picture of a microphone. Just tick it and it will turn it off. I've left it on quietly in the background so it draws my attention. Yeah, as Stuart's pointed out, mic top left. Okay. If you're running your phone with the app as well, it's basically a mirror of what you see there, and things like that. So there we go, all started. Yeah, everyone's flowing in here now. Crikey, we're going to have a full house. Otherwise it does get a bit annoying when it keeps going diddling, diddling, diddling. But let's face it, for you guys who know what the old one was like, that was awful. It was literally like something from DOS land. So yeah. Sorry it doesn't work. Right, 10 speakers down then. Literally just mute. No, you can't do that because you won't hear me. I don't know, it should do. Hold on, let me try it on mine. And then nobody will type. Right, someone type. We'll see if this is working. Who's that just joined? Okay, Stefan in here as well. Roberta is here. Andy Molyneux. Mr. Molyneux, good evening. Is that Severe? Very nice as well. Yes. See, Jerry, I didn't hear it go dilling, so it must be working for me. I've just turned it back on so you can. Here you go, that's it. Yeah, no. You've managed to break your nozzle on your Sparmac SP35. Not good. Hello, Stuart, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. Agree doesn't work. Well, it's working for me. Typing, see if the sound still goes off. Thank you, Gordon. On the other way, I'm being bombarded by all the different directions now. This is really weird. Hello, Mr. Molyneux. Great to have you here, Andy. Hope you enjoyed yourself the other week, and Steve behaved himself. You know, he didn't like, you know, wee in the car or moan too much or whatever it is. Okay, that's all good. Jan, nice to have you here as well. Crikey, I didn't think there'd be this many of us here. I don't know why. I was expecting. We're showing 65 in the chat at the moment from down there. I'm showing 62 watching live. So yeah. Started getting the beep. Yeah. Okay, I will make a note of this chat sound problem and we'll get it fixed. Not working for you either, David. Right, okay, that's another one for my list. And say when I have a contact with them next week, I'll literally settle down and go, right, what's going on? We need to sort it. Okay, what have we got? A couple of minutes left. I'll wait until we go. Happy to join the first live action show. Well, we've done lots of live stuff. This isn't totally new for me. In some ways, live is so much easier for me. No editing, because everything I do sit here normally, I know will follow double the amount of time upstairs editing and then it rendering and going off and all the rest of it. So this is quite nice because literally, as soon as I press stop, it's automatically on YouTube and away we go. Yeah, mute doesn't work. It must be on certain systems because it's working for me. Because if I do that, yeah, see? Yeah, it's working for me. It must be some specific type of a way that it's being used. Obviously, I'm using Google Chrome. It might be different for everything else like that. So, yeah, but it's muted both types. So I haven't got either in the small bottom ones or in the big one either. Yeah. Okay, so let me turn it back on. Mine's muting everything. I can't hear anything when I hit it. As I say, I've just turned it back on now, so as people come in, we can see it. So we've got 2 minutes to run. To be honest, I've been sat here for the last hour ready to go. As amazing as it seemed. I thought we'd have it a little bit later. The idea being is more of you be around. That was the whole point. Until one of you guys pointed out earlier, you were just off to work at about 8:30. So that didn't work, did it? But anyway. Yep, it's people joining. Okay, so apparently the beep works when people join. It probably is actually. No, you shouldn't be hearing it. It's quiet enough you won't hear, but that's a good point. That bleeping you could hear. You're all muting, you're hearing me come through. If it's very quiet like there, it's me. The video is not in HD, isn't it? Should be. I am showing in HD over there. Anybody else not showing it in HD? Shout up if it's all clear or if it's not. It's sending it in HD, and to be honest, it's saying it's in good quality and everything else is like that. So, not sure what's going on with that. Good evening, Al. Great to have you here. Great to have you here as well, Gary. Is that Iric? Sorry, terrible with names. David as well. Good evening. Lovely to have you all here. 1 minute, and then we're get this show on the road. As I say, I haven't done anything yet. Don't panic. I haven't touched anything. I haven't said anything. We'll wait till you are all here, and then we'll go for it in literally 1 minute's time. Gary saying, yeah, 1080 on this side. It should be streaming at 1080 at 60. It's what it's saying it's doing. So HD here. Yep, HD here. So because of the lag, I forget about the lag. We have our lag almost to nothing. I can set it up for like 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes. Half an hour if you like and all the rest of it, but I do it for no lag, so yeah, it may be sometimes as the signal balances and then we get sorted. 72 of us in here now live. We've got 100 watching, crikey. No pressure. Right, okay. As soon as that goes to 1 minute past, I will start. So that way we can edit this bit out at the beginning in post as we make our way through. Okay, but generally I think that's all good. I will sort myself out with a mouse later. I can turn it down probably a little bit more, just in case you guys are hearing my bleeping. Yeah, it takes a few seconds. Sometimes it is that thing with HD, because it's live, it does the buffering thing, you know, and I don't think it's streaming it true HD. It's like a 720 hybrid 1080 type thing, because it's the only way it can do it. But anyway, Stephen, great to have you here as well. Colin, great to have you here. Robert's great to have you here. I think we said that one now. Stuart, lovely to have you here. Walter, lovely to have you here. And Paul, lovely to have you here as well. I won't do a full list of you all because apparently it's 78 in here now. So I've just been doing call outs, we're making our way through. Right, I think everybody is in here. So great to have you in here. Remember, if you're not in the chat room and you want to pop in there, obviously click on the chat thing, it'll take you in. You'll appear in there as well. If you've got a specific question, about what we're doing, post it up in the forum as well. I know it's a little bit complicated jumping around, but as you can imagine, you've got guys in there talking about, you know, the various things they're on about. It's going to scroll past, so I'm going to have to go back and try and find the scrollings of it and everything else like that. So from that point of view, I'm just trying to keep things a little bit easier to find, and then that way I can answer questions in turn as well if they're on the other one. All right. But if you've got specific things as we're talking here, I might get on. But if you lot all start having a conversation in there, I'll never be able to keep up. Right, I'll turn that down just a little bit more. I think we're okay. That's showing 1 over there. Probably need a bit more than that. There we go, 2. Okay, right. So, airbrushing. That's going to drive me mad. Okay, down to that again. No, that's off. Oh my lordy lordy. There we go, that should be right. Okay, so good evening everybody. Welcome to Flory Models Live. The whole purpose of the next few weeks of doing these types of things live is to be totally interactive with you guys. So that way you can then post up your questions to me and I can answer your stuff live as well during our new chat room, which hopefully you're all finding pretty interactive. Now the whole point of tonight is going to be covering literally the basics. Answering some of your questions on about actually airbrushes, about their usage. Some of the questions come up today about difference between single action and double action. I'll show you them live here tonight. Cover a lot of the problems, okay, because as I say, knowledge is everything with this type of hobby. Airbrushing is one of those things where it either works or it doesn't, and it drives you mad. The frustration level comes in and people just walk away from it, okay, when technically it may be something really, really simple and an easy fix, but if you don't know it, it can drive you actually to distraction and all the rest of it. So, down in front of me, you will see my collection of airbrushes. Hopefully, there we go. Okay, this is my collection of airbrushes that I've accumulated over the years. Obviously, we've got some quite expensive ones down here, and we've got some quite cheap ones. And then obviously we've got a little bit in between and everything else like that. Now, you guys know I like my Harder & Steenbeck, okay, which is basically over here, okay, these here. Okay, beautiful airbrushes. You know the reasons I like them. I don't need to recap too much about them. But we're going to be talking about general airbrushing, not specific types and things like that. Okay, so the big thing is at the end of the day is first of all the different types of airbrushes and really what they are and what they do and everything else as we make our way through. Okay, so we can actually put airbrushes into categories. Okay, we've got single action and we've got double action. Now, to be honest, all these over here are double actions, okay? So these are all technically double action airbrushes apart from these two, okay? Now a single action airbrush is like this little guy down here and this weird looking thing, as you can see it. This here is a single action and it's actually what they call a spray painter one. It's literally like using it for spraying in a can. Now this does not have any option on the trigger for pulling it back whatsoever. Okay, it is literally everything is down. All right, so when you're hooked up for air, hopefully we've got a tank full of air to play with tonight. Okay, we literally just push down and it's all air. Okay, so it doesn't matter what we're doing here, you get air. There is no option, okay? But also what it will be doing is introducing paint. Now the way that this one works is literally we have a needle in the back here, and you can probably see this unscrewing at the rear, and this actually retracts the needle. The more we undo this, the further the needle comes back. So every time you push down, you will get the same amount of paint come out. Now to adjust the air, I've got a little Mac valve on mine, okay, but you could have a regulator on your tank or compressor. So we can turn the air pressure right the way down to hardly anything, and you can adjust then the amount of paint you've got coming through at the top. And I will demonstrate this one in a moment when we go through them all, but I'm just going to teach you the different types, okay? So this technically is a single action airbrush. Now, to be honest, in our hobby, this isn't much good, okay? Purely because it's really designed for inks and for artists and things like that, to be honest, and that's why it's this weird shape that just fits in the palm of your hand. This thing is incredibly expensive for what it is, okay? But it does do the job very, very well for those tiny little lines. But when you get artists and you see them and they're literally there with, you know, great works of art on the wall and Marilyn Monroe and they're airbrushing it in, chances are they're probably using something like this, okay? But it's more specifically designed for inks and that type of work, okay? Because what happens is the artist is using it like a brush So every time he presses air down, he's going to get the same amount of paint, same amount of air, and the same amount of ink comes out of it, so to speak, or the paint, okay? So he's going to be putting in that same line. You can't adjust it on the fly, okay? And when I say on the fly, I actually mean as you're using it. Some of them will twiddle the dial at the back here as they're physically spraying it, but you have to be a bit like a, you know, an octopus to try and get your fingers around to doing it all, but I have seen them do it, okay? So that is a Iwata HP M1, okay, single action airbrush, okay? The other type you can get are trigger ones. Now this is technically a single action. Now this is the Neo with the trigger system on it, okay? So you plug this guy in like this, all right, and then again, it's gonna work pretty much similar. So when you pull, the difference being is you get all air, that's just air, and then you can actually feel a bite point on this, and then you get paint come through. And that's actually how it works, but it's always air on. Now to adjust the actual amount of paint, you can have a trigger at the back here, or a lock off at the back, or a stop guard, whatever you want to call it, and this will lock the trigger into one position. So when you're doing it, that's all you're literally going to get all the way through, okay? But again, you can't physically adjust the amount of airflow going through this on the fly and everything else like that, okay? So from that point of view, it's pretty much a you know, a straightforward job, okay? This airbrush is absolutely great for doing those bigger projects, all right? If you're doing any type of big work, this thing is absolutely beautiful. It's not exactly expensive, it's around about 60 quid. It does great for doing bigger type things. If you're doing big work, it's beautiful and all the rest of it. It can go down and do very small work as well, and you can adjust the amount of paint that comes through, and again, I'll show you in a moment how it does it. Now, some of the confusion that come up was about how double action airbrushes work, and I was explaining that all not double actions are exactly the same, so we'll talk about that now. So down here we've actually got an Iwata. This is a double action airbrush. Okay, so you push down for air, you pull back for paint. The great thing with this is that you can, you know, obviously do tiny little amount of paint coming out to all of it in one, okay? And the other thing as well, you can dry off the work without any fear of paint coming out and things like that, and that's why I like double action airbrushes. But this one, if I try and push the trigger down, if I turn the air pressure right up so you can hear it a bit better, okay, it's all or nothing. And this is the trouble with Iwata airbrushes. Now I know all of these aren't the same, but majority of these are. You don't have much playroom on the top. They're not designed for varying the amount of airflow round. It tends to be all air all of the time, but you're varying the amount of paint on the back. So you do need to come in with either a MAC valve or your actual compressor has a regulator fitted to it, and you dial in what type of air pressures you want. So if you want very little, you know, you can hear it changing as I change the air pressure there, then you can maneuver it on the fly. All right, now where the confusion came in is when you take something like this is obviously my trusty Infinity, okay, is that I can physically adjust the airflow. Actually, was this the one we were doing yesterday? I think it was this one, wasn't it, as we were, because I've set the trigger slightly different. But you might hear, or hopefully hear, if I point it at the camera, I can go like this, little amount of air. You see how you can vary the amount of air? So I can actually change the amount of airflow on these. Now, not all airbrushes do this, but it's one of those things, when you've been doing it a long time, you can actually get used to it, and I do use this function. So sometimes if it's a little area, instead of changing the MAC valve, I'll just back off the trigger a little bit and just go in there like this, and then when I'm done, I'll go full on, or I can come off a little bit and all the rest of it. That's where that confusion came in the other day when we were talking about it on this one, okay? Don't worry if you missed the first 8 minutes, you can watch it again afterwards, all right? So that's just basically about different types of airbrush. All we basically said is, obviously, single action, and then obviously you get the trigger ones, which are air and everything. There's very clever airbrushes out there, which I don't own, which have like, it's like an automatic car. Obviously, the more you pull back, the more air is involved and paint. Okay, and they sort of work like that as well. There are those types of airbrushes. Personally, I don't see them. Okay, or see the value in having those ones. All right. My personal recommendation is always get a double action airbrush, okay? The thing is, with a single action airbrush, you're limited in what you can do with it, especially when you're starting out as well, because what can happen is you get wet paint, things like that. The great thing is you just can come along with your airbrush and you can just not pull it back at all and just dry it down. Okay, so you can physically get in there, dry the paintwork down, and you're good to go. Then you can carry on with a little bit. If you've got a single action airbrush, you don't have that option. Okay, so from that point of view, it is well worth, I think, going straight to a double action. I know a lot of people talk about going single action and then making their way to double action and everything else like that. And that's basically it. Okay, so that is your difference between a single action and a double action. Okay, so really you can almost put it into sort of, 3 or 4 different categories. You get the true single action, which literally is as soon as you push down, okay, you're going to be introducing your paint and air in one. You have no option. You get other ones which give you a little bit of leeway on the beginning of the trigger, then the paint is introduced. Okay, so you can do it that way. You've got the sort of Iwata way of doing it, which is all air all the time, but at least you can dry things down. Then you can gradually introduce your paint, okay? Or you've got the other ones, which I sort of call the true double action ones, where you can vary the airflow by the amount of depression you're putting in, and you can obviously vary the amount of paint by pulling back, okay? So that is literally about it. It's just one of those things where, personal choices come into it, but honestly, I think with those ones you're almost immediately starting to make a little bit of trouble for yourself and working for yourself. It's easier to have something like this. If you're talking your Iwata, it's all air and pull back, that's fine as well, it's no problem. Next up, obviously people ask about cost of airbrushes. I don't think cost of an airbrush is specifically a problem, okay? The quality of the airbrush definitely is. Now, as we all know, and we're all guilty of it, especially in the forum, and I've done it myself, Chinese knockoff ones, which work great the first couple of times you use them, and then for some reason they stop working. Normally because it's just cheap metal. Cheap metal is not very good, it's soft, it bends, it doesn't like being chemicals going through it and all the rest of it. You don't have to spend a fortune, but to be honest, if you're talking, airbrushes from the Harder and Steenbeck range, the ones that I like, the Ultra is a great little airbrush. It will get everybody going to start with. It's a double action airbrush and will do anything you can really do to it. Limitations are upgrading it later on and the colour cup's a bit crap, if we're honest, okay? On the other end of it, if you wanted to go cheap way into it, and it's a good airbrush to be honest, considering, is the Neo. It's for Iwata, not Iwata, because technically I think it's almost made by someone like Sparmax. It's someone in Taiwan makes these for them, okay? So it's not a true Iwata airbrush, it's very close to it, but the quality is really good. And again, when you're talking 50 quid for these types of airbrushes, I think they're very, very good, and they will do anything you can need to do. If I wanted to paint a model, I could do it with these as well as the others. The others have a reason why they are expensive and all the rest of it, but honestly, for starting out, there's nothing wrong with these airbrushes. They will teach you and give you the ground rules for absolute everything as you make your way through, okay? So don't be put off sometimes by the cheaper airbrushes and think you have to spend 150, 160, 260 quid on an airbrush, because really you don't. As you say, as long as you go for a well-known brand, chances are you'll be okay. These Chinese knockoff ones can be very problematic, but if you've got a branded one, even if it's their beginner type range, you'll be fine. Just look for a double action airbrush and you'll be fine. Yeah, we will do all of that. Yeah, we talk about all the little things about airbrushes and stuff like that. It's not a problem about the Mac valves and that. We're going to push on to it in a second. The airbrushes themselves, obviously, we're talking double action one you want to go for. Next up is needle size. Okay, again, a lot of people seem to think the smaller the needle, the finer the line, the better detail you'll get. Honestly, anything between a 0.4 and a 0.2 is brilliant for anything we can do, okay? It's no problem for doing mottling work, very tight camo. You can get right in and put hairs down without a problem, okay? And at the same time, you've got enough oomph in it to do primer work and to be putting down thicker paints and things like Steinel Res and neat Tamiya's and neat paints. It's enough to do that one as well. So don't think automatically because you're doing small little work on models and details you need a tiny little needle in there like the 0.15, okay? The 0.15, although it's a great needle and it's great, I still think you're better off with a 0.2, and to be honest, everything I've got has got a 0.2 with the exception of this guy who's got a 0.4 in it. Which I tend to use just for blasting down paint and all the rest of it, okay? But I think the 0.2 is fine, but as we know, Iwata standard is around about the 0.3 right the way through a 0.35s. They are absolutely great. Again, we'll discuss and we'll show it all a little bit later on that it's not actually the smaller needle means you get the best work. You can do it pretty much with anything. It's knowing how the air pressure, distance and the thinness of the actual paint you're putting through means what you're going to get at the end of the day and everything else like that. Okay, so you've got your airbrush, you're happy you know what it does and all the rest of it. Next up, you need to obviously put it onto your actual compressor. So as we were saying just then, if you don't want to keep reaching down to your actual air tank, you can pop one of these on, which is a Mac valve. Okay, this one's a quick release, but you can get them that screw in and all the rest of it. But basically what this does is just click in like this, and then you have a dial which you just dial in. Okay, so if I just push all for air, you can turn off the air, okay, or we just move it anti-clockwise and we can turn up the air pressure. And one revolution is everything on this, okay, that's all it'll do, okay, and you can adjust it on the fly. No problem at all, very, very simple, and it saves having to go down and twiddling your dials on your regulator, setting it and all the rest of it to see what it is down there. Something else I'm going to teach you hopefully over the next few weeks is take no notice of what air pressure you're spraying, because it doesn't make any difference. There's so many variables in this hobby. Forget this thing about what pressure should I be spraying at. It's what works at the end of the day, okay? So from that point of view, remember to keep changing the camera, from that point of view, don't worry about it too much. It's just one of those things that hopefully I'll be able to teach you, is to listen to your airbrush. If you can hear it, it will tell you everything that's wrong with it, okay? And we'll go through all the little key triggers to listen for, the different sounds it will make, and then that way your airbrush will tell you it needs more air pressure, it doesn't need as much air pressure, okay? And various things like that, okay? So that's why I prefer a Mac valve. And people say to me a lot of the time, what air pressure are you spraying at? I haven't got a clue, because really I haven't looked probably in the last 5 years. Okay, again, it's a bit like looking on your rev counter to see how many revs you are in your car. Depends what gear you're in. So to say that you need to be at 1800 RPM and all the rest of it in your car, depends what gear you're in and what you're doing and all the rest of it, okay? Same type of thing goes to this, all right? You can use your air pressure as a start-off point, but honestly, don't worry about it too much. Also, there's so much fluctuation with air pressures, which we'll talk about in a second, between your gauge and your air pressure. Depends on how long your hose is, for instance, and its makeup, okay? I use clear hoses purely so I can see if there's anything coming through it, like water, okay? But some of my air hoses in the past have been, I don't know, 20 feet long, okay? I've had one that's about 50 feet long, used to come from my old shed into the house. The trouble is, these expand with pressure, and over time they soften, so the actual true air pressure isn't the same. Because what happens is, as soon as you start spraying with these contract and expand, it changes the air pressure from what the gauge is actually physically telling you. Okay, so from that point of view as well, that's why sometimes if you notice when you start spraying you get a huge drop off in air pressure, it can be all the air pressure that's built up in the hose. Okay, so from that point of view as well, it's something to think about, but don't worry about air pressures too much because it can change quite a bit over the times as we make our way through. Okay, so what we need to do now really is just talk about the generals of everything you're going to be doing over the next few weeks, all right, and the reasons for it. Air tanks, air compressors, to be honest, they all deliver air. At the end of the day, it's personal choice. Yes, I'd recommend getting one with a tank because it's just quieter. Like now, it's turned itself off, you're not always listening to it. If I wasn't continuously blowing air like we were doing then, you would hardly hear it anyway, all right? So from that point of view, as long as you've got a compressor, you'll be fine. Modern air compressors which don't have a tank are pretty good as well. It's not like the old putt-putt ones that used to get a putt-putt and you'd physically feel it through the end of the airbrush because you could feel the bladder and the non-return working. To be honest, modern ones don't really do it now, so you don't have to worry too much if you have got one of these compressors that you need to have running to get air. They're fine. The only thing you want to avoid is those tiny little Chinese ones that you just plug in because you only got 20 minutes, they overheat, and then you've got to wait 2 hours for them to cool down, which is great until you have to clean out your airbrush, but you can't because you've got no air because your bladder thing is cooling down, okay? So just be mindful of all of that as well, all right, as you're working your way through it. Couple of things to point out as we're going to be working through these ones. First of all, I highly recommend everybody goes and buys a sheet of this. This is Plasticard. It's great because you can use it for scratch building as well, but it's great because this is what you work on. Forget this thing of spraying on paper towel. Paper towel has its place, and spraying on it, it's called cleaning your airbrush. If you're trying to see exactly how you're doing and what your airbrush is up to, you need it to go on a hard surface, because if you're spraying onto paper towel, what's going to happen is it gets absorbed. You're not getting a true reading. You can't tell if you're getting spidering, you can't tell if it's going wet, you can't tell anything. So these guys you see doing airbrush demos spraying onto paper towel, I'm very dubious of it, because it's almost like a cop-out way of doing it. If you're spraying onto neat styrene sheet, that's good because it will show every imperfection you've got. One of the other things we do as well here is show about putting it onto styrene sheet, because it's such a big thing. If you think you've got your model, so you know, this is 30-second scale, you know, you've got this thing, it's going to show up a lot bigger, all your problems. It will magnify it and it makes it so much worse. But trust me, when you take this off and then go back to doing it to your model, things seem a lot easier. Okay, so invest in one of these. You can buy them on eBay. They are literally, I don't know, around about 50p for a sheet. If you buy a pack of 10, you know, something else like that, you can get them for around about a £5, and it's quite handy. This is like 0.5mm, but you can then literally get it in different sizes, and then you can obviously use it for scratch building later on and all the rest of it. But it's great for teaching on and practicing on, because you can see exactly how it all goes down and everything else, literally like that. Okay, so we're going to be doing a lot of that and working our way through. So, any bidding at the moment? Still getting the beep very loud. Well, it's not me. Hi Phil, discuss the pressure reducer valve. Okay, it appears that when you mute the full chat, okay. Yes, more about the MAC valve, where it fits. So the MAC valve on the bottom, literally, I just have it on my hose system like this. It just goes on the bottom, pushes in, and then obviously you just screw it on. I have mine on a quick release system, as all my airbrushes are, as you'll see tonight. Okay, it's just on one of these. Okay, it's your standard, I think this is 3/8 fitting. Okay, so this literally just pokes straight in the end, screws in the end, and then because this is on a non-return valve as well in this, so when it goes in, it's all pressured, so you don't lose your air. Okay, again, their prices vary horrendously. You can pay 20 quid for it. I paid about £5 because I bought a load of them all in once. Okay, but you can have them with obviously just a screw-in version that goes straight onto here, and then you can have them obviously with different size fittings and various things going on down this end, so it'll be specific to your own airbrush exactly how it is. Okay, but a MAC valve I just think is so much easier than frigging around with on a regulator, which must admit, since I've had these valves, I haven't bothered with regulators down the bottom and all the rest of it. Okay, so paint. Okay, again, this is one of those things where I'm not going to too much on it, because it will all be roughly the same. All you're doing at the end of the day is atomizing paint. Alright, this is all an airbrush does. And okay, to come back to my usual way of doing this, and I love doing this trick, where's my most expensive airbrush? This, okay, and this are the same. Okay, there is no difference. They are both tools, they both really tough items. You're not going to break them. Don't worry about it. It costs a lot of money, I know, but trust me, they're designed to be used and abused. Alright, I'm the worst ever about it. I don't clean my airbrushes particularly well. I throw them round, they fall on the floor. Yeah, I go through needles, but everything else on these bodies, they're designed to be used. Alright, when you're using your paintbrush, you don't worry about it, do you? You're very relaxed, you breathe, you're slapping it on and all the rest of it. It's exactly the same with this thing. This is a tool. It is no difference, okay? It just happens to cost a lot more money, all right? But look at it like a long-term investment, because probably over the life of this particular one, is that the one? That's this one here, I've had now for 10 years. I've gone through probably a couple of £100 worth of paintbrushes in that same amount of time, because I'm terrible with paintbrushes as well. They just tend to get thrown around, and they go hard, and then I bin them and buy new ones. So pound for pound, an airbrush is still better value money than anything else that I've got here. Alright, but the thing is, you need to relax. It's a tool. Don't worry about it. Have fun with it. Play with it, especially if you're new to it. Okay, literally, it's that thing. It's one of those things that's going to improve your modeling. You're going to make great effects with it, but you need to trust in your equipment and to know that it's going to work and it's going to be absolutely fine. Literally like that. It's not going to break, honestly. But I get people and they sit here and they're like, "Oh my god, it's so expensive and it's fragile." No, it's not. It's a tool. Don't worry about it. Just chuck yourself into it and you'll be absolutely fine. Paints, as we were saying, acrylic, enamel, lacquer. They're your big three, okay? They all get atomized through an airbrush, so there is no difference. The difference, though, is acrylic tends to dry. I used to be quicker, but honestly, with modern ones these days, enamels and lacquers, probably not. But it's less smelly, it's less toxic, it's not a hot product, okay? So if you're trying to save the fish and not gas your children, then acrylic is probably the nicer way to go. But, and like we explain all the time, if you look at the side of a bottle of Vallejo, I'll get this to come up, come on camera, come on, there we go. God, don't do that to me while I'm live, that's not even funny. Let me just try, there we go. Okay, bottle of Vallejo, all right? It might say don't swallow and all the rest of it, but you can't see a flammable label on this at all. And it's EU, and they're pretty hot on what you can and can't do in the EU, all right? So it's absolutely fine. This one though, look what you see right here, flammable. This is because this isn't actually an acrylic in the true sense of it being a water-based product. This is actually a lacquer-based product. It's a synthetic acrylic. Okay, so what happens is this is actually mixed with a lacquer into the paint and all the rest of it. Harmful, catches fire, not good for you, and all the rest of it. Okay, and then obviously you've got enamels, which to be honest I haven't got any right here, but enamels obviously flammable and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, they are all going to do the same thing. They're going to actually atomize. There's lots of pros and against. We'll talk about those a little bit later on. But again, it's just one of those things where personal choice. It might be regional as well, because let's face it, MRPs, although they're coming down the line now, you get them pretty much anywhere. There's still little gaps where you can't even buy them. Some countries, obviously UK, Spain, all those. Vallejo is to a penny, it's almost in every model shop, but you go other places you're not going to be able to find it. So it's a bit like guns back in the day. 5-6 years ago you couldn't get guns in the UK, as like hen's teeth. Now pretty much everyone stocks it, so it's not a problem. But again, sometimes it can be that thing, necessity. What you can get in your local hobby shop or your country will dictate what paint range you have as well. That's understandable, because it was the same here in the UK. That can't be right. Sorry, my thing's just literally gone bump with loads of people in there. Soundtrack is content, but the picture is freezing. Can't do much about that. It's all saying it's fine up there, 100%, and we're all good. So from that point of view, again, it'll be one of those things. I'll show you the different ways of mixing it up, but generally they're roughly going to do all the same thing. All right. So don't worry about that either. Don't get people telling you you should be using. Again, it's what works best for you. Have a go with all the different products out there, and then get a feel for what works better for you, what works better in your environment. If you're in a small area, if you haven't got spray booths, I would probably recommend going more on the acrylic route, especially Vallejo. It's a little bit more forgiving. Even Tamiya is a bit more whiffy, because obviously it's more of a synthetic paint and all the rest of it, and doing it like that. So, what are we talking? Just making sure I've got this one. Okay, airbrushing types. Compressors, yeah, we covered that. They all just make air. Paints, acrylics and lacquers we just done. Okay, so mixing your paint. Now, this is one of those things where, to be honest, you'll see me every day and I just bung it straight in my colour cup and we go and that it's wrong. You really shouldn't do that. If you're new to this, then really what you want to be doing is something a little bit more like this. Okay, so if we just take... if we want to just take, and just working out some colours we can have floating around here, which are going to show well on camera. Okay, so airbrushing wise, I will, what are we going to do? So we want to show slightly different ones all the way through, so we'll show you probably on that one as well, and we're showing that one, and we're probably showing that one. Let's just move these out of the way for a minute, clear a bit of space. Okay, always mix your paint externally, okay? Don't put it in your colour cup, which again is like, Phil, you always do it in your colour cup. When you get a bit more practice at it and you know it a little bit more, then you can put it in your colour cup. But to start with, get some of these. These are dirt cheap. You can buy them on eBay. They come in like a tube of 100 and they're about, like, I don't know, £1.50. Little plastic disposable shot glasses. Okay, these things are absolutely great. They're invaluable. I use them all over the place, as you know, and they are great for doing it. You can buy specific colour mixing things, but really, you know, again, cheapskate corner comes to mind. You really don't want to be spending a fortune on this type of thing. Okay, so if you are mixing up your paints, though, I'll tell you what, we will use this. We'll use a little bit of brown violet. This here is in one of these little pipette dropper bottles. They are a nightmare to mix up, and I don't know if you can see it, but this one specifically on the bottom here is really grainy and textured, and this is because this bottle has been floating around probably for the last year and I haven't touched it. You probably see the different colours. Again, it needs to be completely mixed. Okay, so there's various things you can do to mix up your paint. Shaking the hell out of it. You can buy a shaker, you can buy a paint mixer, and all the rest of it, but it does need to be thoroughly mixed, okay, to get the right consistency. All too often people, they just grab it, squirt it, and the thick stuff is at the bottom, the thinner stuff is at the top. That's why you get that thing sometimes when you're thinking, it used to be fine, but now my airbrush just stops and starts and stuff. It's because you're putting the thicker thing down, but your ratio hasn't changed. Okay, so you have to think about that as well as you're making your way right the way through with these things. So we're going to give this a bit of a shake and try and wake it up a little bit. Now normally, as you say, I would stick in here a bolt or a nut or anything else, but because we're just going to show this and just a thing, but you can probably see how it's got the thicker stuff at the bottom is literally just not coming away. You can see it down in there, you can see the rest of it's coming away, but this isn't. Now the thing that I like about for starting off is Model A is because you can spray it neat from the bottle, okay? But again, I wouldn't spray it from the bottle. I'll put it down in here. So you have your thing. So all you're going to do is put a bit down in here. Now this stuff is quite thin, okay? But you might be thinking that's not what it says on the old websites and that, when it's supposed to be like milk. Again, get it out of your head that it should be like milk, because in the old days, yeah, probably, but these days modern paints can be sprayed a lot thicker than they used to be. Okay, so that is literally it, just like that. So actually what you could do is just pop it along, shove it in your airbrush and blow it out. But if we just pop this in here, we'll just come along. This is absolutely good. This is just neat as it would be. Okay, and we're just going to put it down onto here. Some air might help. Okay, and you have it coming through and all the rest of it. Okay, but the thing is, this stuff's quite thick. Okay, it's great for doing general coverage and stuff like this, and for just putting down. But I don't know if you can hear it, but it's like it has like a crackle sound to it. It's almost like you can hear it tearing as it's doing. What it is, it's having trouble atomizing the paint, and it's that tearing sound you want to be listening for. If it's tearing, it really means it needs more atomization to it. So how are you going to achieve that? Okay, thin it or add more air. You don't want to add more air because this is a lot of air coming out at the moment, and it's you know, you can hear it, it's really going for it. So really what you want to do is thin it down. Okay, so again, it's just that thing of listening to it. If it was hissing and it was really wet everywhere, you know it's too thin, so you know you can actually knock down the air pressure or make a thicker bit of paint and all the rest of it. Okay, so literally it is just getting used to doing it. Okay, but to start with, if you are new to airbrushing, this is perfectly acceptable to understand what you're actually going to get with your airbrush. Okay, so first time you've just put paint in your airbrush, literally like this, okay, and you just want to know how everything is working. Alright, so literally push all the way down for air. Okay, it sounds quite a lot, but for what we're doing, it doesn't make any difference. Okay, so I'm just going to knock it back a little bit. Okay, so all down, and then gently pull back on the trigger until you can see the paint come in. Okay, and then you just hold. And as you can see, you're just getting the paint coming out and going in. Okay, what you want to do then is just get used to what happens the more you pull the trigger. Okay, so you start off very lightly, and then we're just pulling the trigger, and as you can see, we're not moving our distance, but you can see what's going on here. But as you might notice, down here it's quite tight, but over here it's huge amount of overspray. Okay, and that's because there's too much coming out. Next, I want you to do is literally just pull back a little bit of paint and then go along, but pull your hand away from the surface. Okay, so this is distance. Okay, so literally it's the same, but as you can see, it just fades away. This is because it's just being faded out because we physically come further away from the surface. Okay, so again, it's all about distance. Alright, so then the other one is obviously air pressure. So if we go to not a lot of air pressure and we try and do the same thing, okay, and we go through, okay, pretty much constant. Okay, then if we knock off the air pressure a bit more, right, wrong way, just trying to go very little air pressure, and pull down, you can probably see it's not covering as well. And this is because it's not atomizing as well, as in it's flicking bigger bits just down there and it's not actually physically atomizing the paint. Alright, so from that point of view, that's not very good at all. Alright, what you're trying to discover with this yourself naturally is how an airbrush works in different environments, okay? Because the big three for this one is, okay, is air pressure, distance, okay, and then the makeup of the paint itself, okay. So from that point of view, you can actually learn various things. So if we just up the air pressure just a little bit, okay. So from here, we're just going to sort of around about, I don't know, what are we there, 2 inches. We're just going to up our air pressure, okay, and then get really, really close. And this is right on top. Okay, and then you come a little bit away, and then you move really, really close. Okay, literally like that. And it's learning the pattern you're getting down here. So you can see where we're really close, we've got minimal overspray. Okay, and where we start to move away, you can see we're getting more overspray. And then down on here, we move really, really close, and it goes back again. Okay, this is because we end up with what I call the triangle effect. Okay, so you have your airbrush is literally like this as it's spraying out. Okay, the more you move in, the smaller the pattern's going to be. So the further you are away, the bigger you're going to spray this entire area. Okay, the closer you get, the thinner it's actually going to be as well. All right, so from that point of view, you know, you want to get as close as you can to your model because you're going to get the best coverage onto your model as well. Okay, so from that point of view, if you're away, this is going to be really dusty and it's going to be very, very thin. Okay, but the more you move closer, the thicker it's going to be. Okay, so over here it's going to be thick and dusty, so you really want to be in that nice Goldilocks zone of around about, I reckon, 1 inch to 2 inches away from your model when you're spraying it. Now there's something where I learnt this pretty much the hard way of learning myself, is that the amount of waste paint you'll go through. You can actually fill up a 5mm colour cup and be blasting away at your model like this. So poor old Buster, okay, you were spraying him like this, you will go through probably, I don't know, 50mm of paint just to paint one side of Buster like this far away. But if you get in nice and close and you're putting it down, you get better coverage, but all more importantly, you're getting less wastage. Okay, so from that point of view, you're not wasting it all over the place as it's blowing around. Okay, and that's a lot that I see a lot of people doing. They're like this and they're spraying away, and you're thinking, not being funny, 90% of it is going airborne, filling up your studio or your work area or your wherever you are with all paint that should be going on your model. Okay, and this again is the thing, all right, which we're going to talk about in a moment when we lay it down properly, is air pressure. Okay, because obviously the closer you are to your model, the less air pressure you need because you haven't got to throw it as far. Okay, so from that point of view as well, you want to be right into that sort of zone, getting nice and close to your model, doing little areas, working your way through the model methodically and all the rest of it. Don't be too put on with car painters when you see them putting down big heavy coats like this. They're just trying to cover quite heavily. From our point of view, you're working on something a lot smaller. Okay, so you're just going to be in there bringing in those colours, and obviously thickness of paint and everything else comes into it literally just like that. Cleaning out your airbrush whilst we're just here before we switch over to the other one and do it properly in a minute. Literally, airbrush cleaner. If you want to be cheap and tight, just buy one, use your one. Whoever's paint you tend to be using more of will obviously work best. Personally, I do like the Vallejo airbrush cleaner. I tip half of this into another bottle and then I'll fill this one up with water so it's 100% again. Okay, that way it's great for doing quick colour changes because all you're going to do is come in, put it in. I've got an old brush which doesn't drop bristles because obviously you don't want bristles in. We just poke it down in the work hole like this. I give it a brush around, and then obviously your cleaning station, just pop it in and blow it out. And you're hoping that it's just going to dump the lot in one. Okay, just that through. There we go. Okay. And then what you can do, if you want to, you can just retract the needle out, okay, and the little tip with this one is just to see what is down in the bottom, and you might be able to see on this guy, or hopefully you'll see here, you've got quite a lot of residue and lumps and bumps and nasties and various down in there, because all you've done is literally a quick colour change. It's nothing massive, you haven't gone through there with tons of it. Okay, and then what you can do, just refill just dump it through, and literally the last little bit where it coughs is usually, you want that to run clear, but you can probably see in here some of the bits and pieces and stuff like that. Okay, I don't recommend back blowing. I know a lot of people talk about it when that's the bit where you put your end over and you blow it through and get bubbles to come up. Yeah, I don't know, I just think that's recycling stuff around your airbrush. It doesn't need to. If it's going out one way, that's fine, and all the rest of it. But that's literally just a quick colour change. Full cleaning we do at the end of this, right the way through. Okay, that is literally it. All right, but if you're using slightly different airbrushes, okay, so let's have a go with this guy now. Okay, so what we need to do is unscrew this so we get a good range. We can show you how this one works. Okay, so hopefully we've got enough paint just to show. Okay, that's pretty good stuff in there actually. Okay, so this one is another sheet. We can go through loads of this, but I don't want to macro up the other one yet. Okay, so this guy is literally, you pull down like this, all we've got is air, there's nothing else going on. Sorry, don't pull too much. Okay, this is just air, and then literally as you pull, same thing, we get more paint. Or you can just have air. Okay, it's quite good because you've got a good trigger on here, so you can see exactly what's going on. Okay, so you can just do those little areas, or if you wanted to, tiny little areas. Okay, or you can do big areas. Okay, and you've got everything into thing at the back. You can screw it forward and it will lock the trigger at a certain distance, so that is full pull. Whatever I do will be the same no matter what comes out. Okay, we turn the air pressure down just a little bit. Okay, we can move in nice and tight and do tiny little squiggles and patterns all over this one. Okay, exactly the same. Very, very simple setup on this one. Okay, so you're just air to here, so nothing comes out at all. Okay, and then we pull that next stage and you can feel it, there's like a lump, and then you can just put in the next layer. Okay, and you can just then shadow in. It's a great airbrush, I think, if you guys have got, you know, obviously some type of trouble with your hands, you find gripping an airbrush generally quite difficult. A trigger gives you absolutely great control. Again, Gex make a range of these things and all the rest of it. They can go up in price like all the other airbrushes. This, to be honest, is the cheap Neo version of it that has the trigger system on there. But again, very nice, very handy tool to have. But if you are one of the guys who's got trouble with the hands, then you want to just be a little bit look at these types of airbrushes, have a go with one if you can, go and see somebody at a show and do it literally just like that, as they come in quite handy. Alright, so that's really about it. Okay, and then if you want to, you can unscrew the back and you can let it go with hell on this thing and just blow down to your heart's content until we're out. And then same thing again, we're just going to pop this guy down in here. Grab our brush, quick whiz around in this. Okay, and to be honest, we'll just then pop this back over. That guy doesn't technically fit in my trouble though with that one. Sorry, come on, that way. It doesn't fit into my controller, into my handler there, because I can't actually push it in the end. So you have to sort of do it like that. But again, blow it through till you're out and you're good to go. The last little one, just to show you here, is this single action one we were playing with. Okay, so this little dinky guy, he's a little bit weird and a little bit different. Again, this one really is designed for artists. Okay, so you literally have, if I close this off, this is all air now and nothing else. Okay, this is the definitive sort of single action airbrush. So that's it. So now I rotate this little guy at the back, and then depending on how much I rotate it, depends on how much paint we get coming out the end. Okay, and as you can see, that's it. But if you get clever with this, you can actually rotate it on the fly. But you can put down normal colour with it, or you can actually then screw it back in and do very fine amounts. like this, and you can get really close and put tiny little squiggles and hairs and things on badgers, bums and everything with it, okay? And literally that's how this works, but literally everything is all in one, okay? It's really designed, or I'm led to believe this was designed for artists in mind who used to using spray cans, because it works in the same fashion as a spray can, okay? But you can go in and put it in. Again, I've never really got on with it because of, well, it's not my style of airbrushing at all. I like the comfiness of an actual airbrush in its traditional form. I just find that the easiest to use, okay? There we go. Just blow this through. So you do that, and then we just blow through again. And the great thing, obviously, with using acrylics and Valleos especially, is they are a doddle to clean. They clean up, we have no real problem with them whatsoever, okay? They are pretty much very, very nice, okay? Right, okay, let's move on to actually using this in anger. So that's the theory, and then I'll recap all of this again, and we'll show it, because I know I'm rabbiting through this at a rate of knots, but I'm aware of time zipping along by us. Okay, this, it's great. Don't forget, once you've used it and you sprayed all over it, get some thinners, wipe it down, it'd be good to go. You can use this again and again. To be honest, this has probably been used about 25 times in the past, and all I do is give it a wipe down and we go again. That's how we used to do it, okay? So, for using your airbrushes, obviously we've spoken about all the ones down in here and everything else like that. So what I will do is, if we use, I don't know which airbrush to use really, but if we try this one here, we'll just talk about the different ones of it. Okay, so this guy down in here, literally, pretty much my go-to airbrush, what we like. It's your standard double action airbrush. Honestly, don't be too sort of drawn into the thing about different airbrushes giving you different effects. At the end of the day, they all do the same thing. They all atomize paint and put it down, okay? Some of them do it perhaps a little bit differently to others, but at the end of the day, they are all doing the same thing. Alright, so from my point of view, I just happen to like this particular type of airbrush. It's a style thing. It's a bit like cars, what type of car you like, it's obviously sometimes it's just because people have recommended, I've recommended to you, but honestly it should be what feels right to you. What feels good in the hand, it's what feels more comfortable, it's what works for you at the end of the day, okay? So from this point of view, all we're going to do is just going to use the Vallejo, and we're going to spray it neat just for the minute, and then we'll sort of change things up as we make our way through. So we're just going to put in a few mil, well, 1 mil in there like that. Okay, pretend it came from the proper colour cut. Okay, what you want to do is have a paper towel next to you, your work all the time, just so you can check your flow and make sure your airbrush is working how you want it to. Okay, so from my point of view, we just check our flow, because this airbrush, I haven't used it actually in a while. Okay, so we just got it in there like that, and we know we've got good airflow, good air pressure and everything else. Alright, so then you move it over to your proper piece of work. First of all, you just want to do that simple thing of doing some lines and just getting used to actually spraying with paint in your airbrush. Now, spraying on this is totally different to spraying on paper. This will not forgive anything, okay? So you just want to work out to start with what's going on. So we're coming in and we're spraying. Okay, so all we're going to do for the moment is just going to do some distance things, and we're doing some patterns and various squiggles and things, and we'll go right in and out and various things like that. Okay, and then you can have a look to see exactly what you've got going on. So the first thing you're doing is, when you look at it over here where we started, it's quite fuzzy. It's not really covered particularly well, okay, and everything else like that. So you were thinking, okay, so why is it doing that? Alright, so to start with, the thing is, the air pressure is a little bit too high for the distance, purely because it's just blowing it everywhere but where you want it. Okay, so some of it is actually probably hitting and blowing all over the place and everything else like that. Okay, and as we make our way round, it's pretty much the same all the time as we make our way in, until we get up to here, where I've introduced or pulled the trigger a little bit more, and we got some more paint coming out, so it's covering a little bit better. That's why it's gone darker. Then as we've swung around in here and we're making our way around, we've got like a sharp edge on one side. I don't know how well you can see that, If I grab my little thing here, hopefully we can get you in just a little bit more. Okay, you see you've got like a sharp edge. This is because at that point I leaned the airbrush slightly to one side as I was making my way through. Instead of being right over the top and just spraying down, I moved it to a slight angle as we went along. So what's happened is it's cut it. Literally, it's made a sharper edge because we were slightly on an edge here. Okay, and as you can see, it's darker on this edge as well because it's built up the paint, because there was more paint hitting there, because that V shape we were talking, it's pushed it in that corner as we've gone round and done it. So as we've pushed round over this side, you can see exactly why it's got a darker on one side, a lighter on the other. It was purely because we were closer, okay, on the edge. So the airbrush was lying probably 45 degrees as we made our way down, and then we swung back up, and as soon as we came back up we leveled off. Okay, so it's quite sharp all the way around here, and then we've leveled off and we've gone round and it's faded off a bit. Could have been me, I've moved away from it, it's got thinner. Okay, and then we've come down in here and you can hardly see it. To be honest, it was me coming off the beans, if you like, of the airbrush. And then again down in here you can see how it's almost, it looks like it's made a trench. This is because we're physically too close now. What it is, it's pushing the paint to both the sides as it's making its way down here. It's also got, if you can see it, but tiny little lines in it. It's actually pushing the paint because we are too close to it. Okay, so the air pressure is physically pushing the paint out of the way because we're too close. And then a good example of it is just over here. You can see as it pushes around here, it's actually starting to spider to the side where we're too close for the air, and it's physically just pushing it all out of the way, right the way around on here, and it looks quite three-dimensional around here again. I've lent the airbrush down, it's cut in quite sharp, but you can see you've got tiny little, looks like hairs coming off of it. That's because it's pushing everything out of the way, okay? And it's understanding some of this that enables you sometimes to get an idea of where you're going wrong, all right? So from that point of view, it's a case of, right, I understand what is there, and then you can then obviously make some little changes as you make your way through. So in round two, we'll just come along and we'll just check our flow. We're making sure we're all good. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're going to try that again, but we do it over here. Okay, so we just all air, and then we're just going to come in and we're just going to take our time and be a little bit more precise with it. And we're moving nice and close now, but we're not putting in much paint. I'm not pulling back on the trigger, anything like we were doing before. Now I'm adding a bit more paint, and you can see we're starting to get back to that problem. Okay, so from that point of view, we're just all air, pulling back very slightly. We're introducing the paint in, and then we're using very small amounts of paint so we can get really, really close. I know a lot of people struggle doing very fine lines, okay? It's literally all about getting right in there with it, okay? So again, all air, slightly little bit of paint, and we can get in here now and we can just wiggle this along and we can come in and we can go, all right? And you can put in tiny, tiny little hairs and everything else like that, all right? But if we want to, we can go in and we can just colour in an area. So we're just going to pull back, okay, pulling back on the airbrush, and we're just going to fill in a little area just like that. It's personal how you want to do it, but it's that thing about learning distance and pressure, okay? So it is that thing at the end of the day. So you might think, right, okay, that's great, Phil, but I can't get to do thin, squiggly, tiny little lines like that. I need to get it to be a little bit more, you know, control over it, and to get it to go through and everything else, all right? So a couple of things you really need to do. First of all, check your airbrush is working properly, okay? And at the end of the day, you've got good flow. We've got basically a good mix of paint in here. It's pretty much, you know, straight out of the bottle and everything else like that. But if we was to come in now and we add, this is X20A into this, okay, just a little bit of a squirt in there, so we've probably taken it up to around about a third thinners into this. Okay, and then if you listen, you can hear, let me compress it, finish. I can turn it off. Okay, so if you listen to the paint, a little bit of spitting coming in there as well as it's clearing its needle. Oops, sorry, my needle's actually unscrewed. So now, which is quite handy, when we've gone to spray this, it's actually ruined our flow. Remember we had that nice flow, and now we've got all of it and nothing's coming through. And what's happened is that it's thickening up inside the colour cup. So now we're just going to pump, and we got nothing coming out, which is quite handy. Okay, so you can see nothing. We pump the trigger, we can see the needle going back and forward and nothing's coming out at all. So we just keep pumping the trigger. Okay, and it's spitting with every pump, and this is because it's got thick. There's a thick piece of paint down in the needle area in the nozzle. Okay, so sometimes if you just keep all air and pumping, what will happen is it will blow through. If it won't, oh, I'm dumping paint everywhere here. Come on, kick through, you little bugger. Okay, and that is why we'll try round 2. Okay, if you grab a little bit of thinners in a cup. Okay, if you take a little bit of thinners like that, grab it on a brush and just brush the end of the needle. Okay, so you just brush it in there and then try that again. Sometimes it can be enough just to melt what's happened in the full end of the nozzle, which usual thing, this one's not going to do it now. So what we're going to do is dump that paint into my old cup down there. Okay, and we're going to do a quick flush through. Okay, so what we're going to do is just get rid of all that paint that's in there as much as we can, because obviously we can't blow it through because it won't blow through. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to put some airbrush cleaner in. Okay, let's just grab a brush. Right down in there. And to be honest, what I'm going to do is I'm going to tip that okay, and I'm a firm believer in dumping a colour cup full like that rather than mess around with it. So what we're going to do is just going to whip that off like that, clean that through, and then we're just going to pull the needle. Okay, pull the needle out the back. And then what we're going to do is we're just going to reseat the needle. Thinners back in. Put the back on. I'm just going to pump this guy, and then hopefully it's enough for this to get this guy out. And if he doesn't, which he's not going to, so what's happened in here now, to be honest, something's dislodged in my nozzle, which is a bit of a pain, because I thought it was clean, and obviously it wasn't. So, okay, whip the needle out the back, stick that safe, front comes off, and this is the beauty about Harder and Steenbeck airbrushes, because we can have the nozzle out instantly to see what's going on just down in here. And what you can actually do is take your needle and just very gingerly have a poke, and if you can feel something thick, okay, as if you're stabbing, well, nasties, and there it is. That is the problem. It is just this little chunk of paint which is thickened down the end, and now you can see when you drag it across your finger you actually have no problem. But that's it, that was that little problem. That's all it was, something as small as that. So you don't need specifically cleaning tools or anything to get in here. And now when I actually poke the needle in, and I'm not ramming it in, but you're tapping home, you can feel it hitting metal instead of hitting anything else. So then what you can do, instead of having to clean it out and all the rest of it, you can just pop this guy back up and in. Okay, make sure your needle's in first. And again, I can feel it hitting home. Okay, so just the thinners. And then hopefully, it should, once we've got another one, this is the beauty of it. There we go. Okay. And all we're going to do is just flat out just drain this entire bit of colour cut. There we go, sorted, problem averted. Okay, but it's actually handy it does these things because I can show you. I think the real reason for that probably is that this airbrush I tend to use for lacquer paints only, and then obviously I've come in today and put acrylic through it and it's probably what it didn't like. Okay, so, right, try again. So, what we're going to do is I'm just going to make up a mix in here. Okay, so this is that one we had before, X20A, straight in here, about a 50-50 mix. Okay, and then mix up your paint. And this will probably give you a more traditional, what you're thinking about, a very thin mix. Okay, so again, check it, make sure you've got no lumps, no nasties or anything else in there at all. Then stick it in. Okay, then we're going to check our flow. Okay, then okay, so this is the thinner one now. I'm just keeping an eye on this needle and this nozzle. Okay, so let's try that again. So this is the thin version now as we come in with this. Okay, so it's been thin 50-50. So what we're going to do is somewhat repeat what we did before. Okay, so literally all air, pulling back a little bit till we got paint coming through. Okay. So the first thing you notice is it's not a strong colour. That's because the paint has been thin. That's the first thing you have to allow for. The second thing is obviously the amount that's going down there. It doesn't need to be anything. You can see we've got this trenching going through there. That's because it is too much air going through the actual airbrush, or you're too close. Okay, so what I'm going to do is knock it back, the air pressure just back a little bit, and we'll show again. Okay, so now okay, still probably too much air, so you're just finding the sweet spot. There we go. So you find that sweet spot of paint and air down on there. And if we show you on here, so doing that same thing as we did before, we're quite close, no problem at all. We can come in with very thin. Okay, then as we lift away, you can see how it sort of thins out, you can't see much. Dropping down nice and close again. Now I'm pulling on the trigger. You're finding that balancing spot between good coverage and everything else. And to be honest, probably the air pressure is still a little bit high, and you can probably hear the difference in it. Now, realistically, we're probably down to about 7 psi. It's ridiculously how low you can get it by thinning the paint, because the airbrush physically isn't having to work as high now. Okay, and it gives you a very nice constant flow. And you can probably see how we're getting quite good coverage as well. And then obviously if you were talking spraying a model, you know, we're putting this down here. But the other thing as well, the less air you're using, the less paint you're using as well. Okay, so from that point of view, you know, it isn't. But the thing is, you're obviously going to get to that point where if you do too little air, like here, you start to see it now, it's looking, let me show you these now. This one we did, if you can see this, it's really broken. Okay, it's not very nice at all. Okay, so if we come in, and this is because we have reached that point where there's no atomization taking place. Okay, it needs to be a little bit more air in there just to get everything going. Okay, and then once you're in, you're good to go, and you can move in, and you can get stupid if you want. I know guys say you can't do tiny thin lines with stuff. Well, I digress. You can bloody do tiny stuff if you want, you know, and down onto plastic hard and everything else, and you can just get it down. And I know it seems to be this holy grail of doing stupidly thin tiny little lines and stuff like that, but honestly it's not all it's cracked up to be, because in the real world you don't really do it anyway. So you just want a nice solid coat and just get used to how your airbrush goes. Pull the trigger a little bit more, and you can see down in here we were doing that cutting thing and it's trenching and it's pushing away. That's too much, so you just want to back off a little bit. Okay, so what we're trying to do with all of these is just learning how and why and where. Okay, so by looking at your pattern you can say, well, over here this was really nice and tight and we were really close and it looked absolutely fantastic, but down in here it's broken, it's got tiny little gaps. That's because there wasn't quite enough air in there to keep it, you know, the actual atomization of the airbrush going all the time. All right, so from that point of view, it's whilst it looks quite impressive and thing, when you look at it really up close, it's no good because you don't really want it. And anything else like that. All right, so from that point of view, it's just that thing. So just learn to play with your air pressure. Okay, learning the sweet spot of where it is. Also learning how far to pull the trigger. What's a good working area for your trigger? It's certainly not all the way back. Very, very rare will I go full tilt and pull it all the way back. If you have got one with a lock off at the back, just lock it off halfway. Okay, and then that way you'll go through. Also, the thing is, you will learn, if you get more control over your air pressure and your distance, you'll be amazed how little paint you use. And when you come into doing things like using MRPs, which are like spraying water, okay, you'll be amazed how much you actually use. I did the entire A10 on that with a quarter of a bottle. If I'd been acrylics, I would have probably used 2 bottles to do that one. And it is that thing, but it's learning exactly why and where things are actually doing it. So if you've got a situation, and then obviously, you know, this is going back pretty much the other way. So we're too high air pressure now. Okay, so we are coming through. Okay, so we're just coming in now, and because we're very high air pressure, it looks really wet for one. Okay, and then, you know, you're going through and it's right, okay. And I'm trying not to compensate, because as soon as it looks wet I pull away and you come away a bit, so we're trying to stay down in there, but you come in and then it's horrible and it's just too much. It's too much paint, it's too much air, you're too close. It's all the things that are wrong with it. Okay, so you just need to back off a little bit. All right, so just remember, hardly any pull on your trigger, just so you get a comfortable amount of paint coming out. Okay, and when you have, then start to play with it. So we're doing this now and it's coming through nice and it's great and it's no problem at all. So then just vary how close you can get to your model, and when it gets too close and you're getting that trenching thing, then you think, well, look, I can go that close, but I need to knock the air pressure down. All right, so think of it like I always say about a hill start in a car. It's clutch in manual, okay, but it's clutch, obviously, then you've got your throttle and your brake. It's the balance of all three. So you need on the clutch, be actually lifting off the clutch, a little bit of throttle. I always describe that as air pressure and distance, because if you back off the actual air pressure, you can move closer. Okay, so it's in that sort of variable type of thing of everything. But a lot of people, I think they just forget about it, and all they have is their airbrush, and they just turn it on and they go, right, I just want paint. I'm just going to paint, and we're going to go down like this. And whilst, yes, it will do it and all the rest of it, and you can spray, it's just laying down paint. You might as well use a rattle can. You want to be a little bit more refined with it and just understanding exactly what's going on with it as you're putting down squiggles and patterns and all the rest of it. The other thing as well, basic tips, is accuracy. So I know we call it noughts and crosses and boobs and all the rest of it, but it's just getting used to doing them. And also when you do the eyes, I'll be politically correct, but also it's doing it so you don't get a splodge. So it's control. So you're literally coming along and you do circles with dots in the middle, getting the circle to join up because it's good action. Okay, it also teaches you just to have that right sort of feel, so it's constant all the time. Every time you go down you get the same type of effect. So you want all your circles to look exactly the same as you put them all down. But again, doing it on plastic card, it's a lot harder than paper towel. Paper towel, you just push it down. Plastic card's a lot harder because you need to see it. And also when you do the dots in the middle, you want them in the middle and you want them to be a perfect circle or a perfect dot. Okay, you don't want it to be blown off or a tail coming off of it. And it's just little exercises like this which teach you to sort of come on and to get that sort of similar type of thing to them all and everything else like that. So when you are doing it, it just, again, it's that thing, you know where it is. People talk about having gun sights on airbrushes and things like that. I don't think you need them. You just have a fun with it and you just go along and put them in, and then once you've done it you can then practice shading them in, okay, and doing various things with it. Okay, and again, it's just learning on your airbrush of exactly what's going on, where and when. All right, So I'm going to answer questions in a minute, so if you want to chuck up questions either in the forum, in the chat thing, I'll answer them in a sec, because we're going to go over, but we knew we would. A couple of things you can get, okay? Just troubles straight off the bat for this basic one today. No paint, no air, okay? It could be your nozzle is physically jammed. If you do this and nothing comes out, the chances are that it's your nozzle has physically bunged up. Because what happens is your air and your paint, okay, all go through that one nozzle. If it's completely sealed off at the end, nothing can physically get out of it, all right? So from that point of view, that's what it is. So usually you'll find that the needle's quite difficult to pull out as well. That's because it's stuck in your nozzle. So if you're ever in that thing and you go and just nothing, chances are it's your nozzle. Obviously check the basics that you've got air coming through. So, you know, make sure you've got air actually coming out of this area and into here, so you can do the old trick of, you know, just put it through here. Make sure you've got air coming through here. If you've got it coming through here, then you know you're fine with your actual airbrush, and then you can just put it in and you'll be good to go, literally like that, all right? So from that point of view, what you want to do, it'll be that standard thing, which we'll do just here. You're just going to want to do a full tear down of it, all right? So you'll just come across, all right? You've got a little bit of paint still in here, so we'll just go airbrush cleaner. This is for doing a proper clean afterwards, okay? Clean out your actual paint down in there. Don't blow it through, tip it, because what can happen is you can actually get build up of dry crusty bits around the end here, okay? So if you've got dried bits down in there, if you try and blow it through, but if you've been spraying for like an hour, you might end up with like a skin. You don't want that at all, okay? So from that point of view, just make sure that that is all blown out. Once that's all out, tipped out away and all the rest of it, then you can come back in. So again, we just put a little bit more back in here, put it in, and then blow it down. And we're just gonna obviously pump the old trigger. And again, this one's bunged up a little bit. Okay, so what we're going to do is tip all of that. Okay, and then all I do, needle out the back, okay, and a quick wipe off the needle, then off the front. Okay, and then what you can actually do, you can use a brush or you can use a needle or whatever else you want to do. What's got on it? I can't remember what one's got on it now. Okay, so what I'm going to do is, okay, so actually what you can do just with a brush, if you haven't got the correct tools, you don't need them, you can just poke it down in here. Okay, give it a proper flush out, and what you want to do is just drag it along your mat. Okay, and let it all drain out the bottom, because it's a good way of draining it completely. Okay, and you can see daylight through it, that's always a good sign. Okay, so that's no problem at all. Always have a quick clean around the body of the airbrush as well, so it never hurts to literally just keep it all nice and clean, absolutely everywhere. Down in here, up in here as well, just make sure you're actually clean, you should be. So a quick blow through like that, doesn't hurt. Okay, pop the nozzle and needle back in. Okay, and then blow through, grab your needle in, insert. And when you push needle in, don't ram it home, you just tap it gently. Okay, this is just clear coming through now, which is nice. You can see this coming through. Really, really nice on this one. Now, quick tip, because I can show you right here on my little list of things to talk about. Okay, you get bubbles in your colour cut. Okay, so you're doing this, I have to do this slowly because I don't want to wear it, but we got bubbles. It's because the end's not done up. If you do the end up, that's it, gone. Okay, no more bubbles. Sometimes you might just get one or two tiny little ones. We'll open this up again, that's too much. Okay, you can see bubbles. Again, just tighten up the front end like that and then blow this through and you'll be good to go. Okay, I'm just going to hoover that all the way home. And when you're blowing it through like this, what you're looking for is to make sure there's no colour coming out. You want this to be totally clear. As you can see, we're almost down to nothing. And that is it. And that last bit, there's nothing coming through whatsoever. Okay, and you'll be absolutely fine. If you get colour, like there, it's just spot a little bit of colour, that means there's a tiny bit of something still in there. So again, go over to the clean part, and you want to blow that last bit through. You want to be able to see the needle at the bottom. Okay, and then just listen for it to change as the last bit goes through. Then you're clear. Okay, so that's it. That's all you need to do. What you can do if you wanted to is take the needle out. Okay, quick wipe of the needle, and you can keep the needle if you want separate to the actual airbrush. I know Hans does. Personally, I don't. I always just leave mine in and away you go. What you can do as well if you wanted to, just put a smidgen of airbrush cleaner in there. It's Teflon seals, it's not going to hurt. You keep spraying it until you see it disappear. Okay, and when it disappears, like there, I stop because nothing will leak out of it, but it's just got a tiny bit now just sat down there. It's Teflon seals, there's no rubber, it's not going to go off, it's not going to harm, but what it stops it is the needle jamming and stuff like that. Okay, and literally that is it. It's as simple as that. Alright, now another little problem you can get is spray patterns. Okay, you're spraying it and for some reason it's at a funny angle, like it's going up or it's off to one side. Chances are you've got a bend on the tip of your needle. Okay, now I don't think I've got one here, but I might have an old one. Okay, let me just grab an old one, but it can be you're spraying and it's just, I don't know, it's going off at a funny angle, so it could be the nozzle or a needle that is playing up. So what you want to do is take your needle out and just rub it. Would you believe it? That was fine. Okay, but you want to take your needle and you just rub it on a piece of tissue. Can't believe they're both fine. I thought one of them at least be have a problem. But what you're listening for is it tearing and ripping, because what happens is you can have a little hook on the end, and what's happening is it goes down the needle and then gets fired off at an angle, and that's why you can get funny spray patterns and stuff like that. To be honest, I swore we had one here with a dodgy hook on it. No, we're pretty much. But if you draw it along and you hear it tearing, what you do then, take a very fine sanding stick or sheet or whatever and just run it along and just gently, just on the tip on that tear, and sand it off, and then come back to your paper and then just pull it along, and it shouldn't tear. If you feel it ripping, then just take it over and just sand it off. That will fix it. The other thing you want to check is the actual nozzle end as well. It doesn't have a split in it. It's got a tiny split. It can go off at a funny angle as well. Alright, so if you've got something like that going on, then definitely that is something to look out for as well. That can be a little bit of a common problem. Mixing up your paint though, to be honest, and in the next one we'll cover this properly about all the different mixes and everything else like that, is pretty much key. Key to a good flow of paint and all the rest of it is a good mix of paint. What we were saying before about mixing your paint thoroughly, using a mixer, straining your paint even before it goes in your airbrush as well, that will stop all of those problems of stopping and starting and problems and various things like that. Okay, one little tip I can just show you here as well. If you ever have this thing where you're trying to undo perhaps the actual the collet down here at the back and it's just spinning all the time, right? If you pull the trigger back on your actual airbrush, if you look down in the section down in here, you'll see it's got a square. Okay, so what can happen is sometimes that this just spins and it's because it's not seated correctly. Okay, so if you make sure it's seated in, because all of them have a little square end, then pull the trigger back, then undo the collet. Okay, because it will lock this entire section in one and it stops the needle from spinning round in there. So if you pull it back, then undo the collet. But sometimes I know people have said that they're trying to undo this bit here and it is literally just spinning round. It's doing this, going round and round and round, and they can't stop it. But if you make sure it locks back in here, so when you unscrew it, it stops this entire back section spinning round, alright? Because it is like a castle nut in there, and it's designed to catch onto it and to physically stop it going round, okay? So actually it's gripping everything and keeping everything level as it makes its way in, alright? So that's another little one there. Buddy bands, needle, can't remove, pull the trigger. Yeah, we've done that one. No paint at all. I think we covered that one. Right, okay, so questions. Difference. Right, okay, so what I'll do is I'll just go through the chat and then I will go back down the other one. Okay, so, right, okay. Self-leveling thinnest, funny as yesterday. What happened? Got the paint, didn't work. Okay, nasty stuff. X20A mixed with Vallejo. Yeah, absolutely. X20A you can mix with absolutely everything. You have no problem with that at all. That's absolutely fine. I know Vallejo turns to gloop with lacquer thinners. Yeah, don't put lacquer thinners into Vallejo because it will turn to toffee. But if you keep adding lacquer thinners, it will go thinner, so you won't have any problem with that. You can use IPA as well, that works absolutely fine as well. Gloopy on purpose and how to fix block nozzles, you'd think so. Hardly anyone under 40 over here knows what a clutch is. Yeah, well, you guys in the States don't have one. I must admit, I drove automatic for years. I've gone back to actually doing a stick shift now. It's one of those things, actually, more to do when you're driving. I prefer it. Right, okay, so what about the choke then? Does anybody else get this freezing up? Use the railway, explain the difference. Okay, so difference between the pinch ends and your standards, okay? To be honest, all these, all these are is needle guards of some description. Okay, so what happens is this one just stops it, and actually on the Iwata, if I can get the end bit off without the rest of it. I'll tell you what, I'll try on this one because it doesn't look like this one's covered in paint. No, can't get this one off either. Oh, typical. Okay, but down in here, it's like a solid. Okay, it's a ring. On this guy here, you can see it's got little holes in it as well. Okay, but you can also have, what I like to use is the actual pinch clean nozzles on this one, and it is literally as it says, because what you can do is just come along with your paper towel over the top, pinch clean the end, and you can drag any dried residue or anything off the needle. Also, for this point of view, you can see the needle as well. You can see exactly what's going on with it at any one time, and you don't really have a problem. Okay. Also, the thing is with this, you get less build up around it. Some of these, because they're quite close at the distance, if you're spraying a thicker paint, you can actually get build up and then you get spitting. Okay, not so much with the Iwata ones, but because they tend to have a wider end on them. But this one negates that problem. But there is a downside. Obviously, this one is opened up. You can break the needle or bend the needle certainly by misplacing it into a holder or just generally catching it wrong. So there is a drawback to having the more exposed pinch end needle, two-prong end, but from my point of view you can see exactly what's going on, and obviously you can just come in and pinch the end off and clean it off literally like that and do it that way. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. Points of prices. Can you explain different thingies? Okay, I use cellulose thinners for all the internal clean, and then airbrush cleaner to flush it all out. Seems clean, faster, and pure cleano done. It is. To be honest, that's what I tend to do, but it depends. If I'm using acrylic paint in my airbrush, I tend to just use acrylic paints through it, so I use acrylic cleaners through it. Okay, so I don't tend to put lacquers or cellulose paints, thinners, through something that's just had acrylics through it, because I don't think to find it works particularly well, because it thickens things up and it can make things go sticky. But if I'm using lacquer-based paints, then obviously that's exactly what I'll do. But the reason I like using a proper airbrush cleaner, as we said before in one of the live shows, is that it actually lubricates and oils up, so to speak, all the internals as well that's down in there, i.e. the seals, around the nozzle area, all of those things. If you look at it, you can blow bubbles with it. It's obviously got some type of something in it that gives it that type of effect. Okay. Krista says, I always retract the needle between painting. Never bent a needle after. Yeah, absolutely. Phil, I have the H&S Infinity with the 0.2 needle when I'm painting and want a very thin line or very precise spraying, I find that I push down and get the air and then start to pull back the paint. I pull back and the back and back, and then all of a sudden you get a rush comes out, and I start at 50%. What that is, Jerry, is literally your paint mix is thick. So what happens is sometimes is that when you put your paint mix in, the heavier particles will settle to the bottom naturally, and then they get pushed through to the nozzle, and what happens is you've got that thick wall just sits there. And sometimes if you've had your paint hanging around a while, like you've mixed up your paint, you put it in your airbrush, you put it down, you get your model, it's dry just at that initial thing and it makes like a skin. So you pull back until it almost bursts. Okay, so it bursts, spits out a big load, and then you're good to go. That's why I say about have a piece of tissue next to you. Okay, so you have your part like this. So when you are spraying, blow through, just go full trigger all the way back. Blow that little skin bit out, get rid of it all. So then when you go in next time, okay, go all air and gently back, you'll be good to go, all right? But that's all it is. It's just where it's thickening up and drying in there and everything else like that. What's your opinion on fan spray pattern? Sorry, don't understand that question. Fan spray pattern? As in the ones which lay them out just in that type of way, like you can get car painting ones and do it. Personally, I don't think you really need it on something as small as we do here. It's great, I think fan spray pattern ones, you can buy the nozzles for it that do it. It's great for if you're doing like vehicles, if you're into like cars and you want that nice even finish right the way over. But certainly for doing our type of work of camo and that, and you're coming in from all the different angles, you really just need that sort of circle one to go with. I've had needles and nozzles in the past that have given me like a chisel edge. Okay, and I actually sometimes will deliberately keep that, because if you just want to do a line like staining or gun smokes, they're quite handy for doing that effect. But that isn't through choice, that's just because I've ruined a needle or something else like that and done those types of things. But yeah, generally I think if you're doing vehicle shells, bikes, cars, stuff like that, then the fan pattern's probably very nice for giving a very nice even paint finish, especially with lacquers and finishing coats, stuff like that. Do you leave some cleaner in the colour cup when you're done, or do you empty out? As I said before, I take it literally down to the needle. When it disappears from the needle and goes in, there's still a tiny bit down in the chamber, if you like. I leave that bit in, okay? And because it's in there, it won't evaporate, because it's just no way it can evaporate. There's just not enough air getting around in that area. Obviously over time it will, but you'll be fine just like that. Right, if I pop over to the questions and just see if we had any there. Keep them coming in the chat while I'll answer right up to sort of 10 o'clock if you want, guys. Right, Chris says, really looking forward to this. I'm watching with a pen and poised. Right, my biggest issue is the right thinners and what to ratio and how to use them. To be honest, in the next part we're going to cover literally paint mixes and then the effects they give. So when your paint mix is very thin, obviously you can get a lot closer because you can back off the air pressure, but it's obviously going to give you that type of more of a wet look, because obviously you're using a thinner paint. But we're going to talk about that. What I wanted to do today is explain that it's not just all about chucking down paint. It's knowing what's going on about the thinness and reading on a big piece of paper or card what's going on, because you can't see it when you put it onto a model. If you were spraying Buster, I wouldn't be able to see it, but on here I can see exactly what's gone on and why, okay? So you can actually look at it and then see, well look, it's gone a bit funny there. Honestly, on a model you'd never see it. That's why I quite like this one. So what we'll do next week is literally I'll clean this off and we'll start to do squares, and we'll talk about distances and the actual effect you get. Okay, so obviously if you're too far away you get grittiness and it's quite textured. If you're very close it's quite wet, and the various things like that as we make our way through on these. And right, okay, hello guys. Is there any special no-no when it comes to overspray? Again, we'll be talking about this type of ones when you're overcoating other types of paints. Technically, as long as you spray down a totally cured paint, you'll be fine as long as you don't flood it. I think if you get in there and obviously you put down and it's really wet looking, what it's going to do is soften the one below. Sorry, voice is going. Okay, so from that point of view, you need it to be quite, you know, sort of very nice, dry, so it dries down quickly, so it's not going to affect the coat below. But as long as you're not flooding it, I think you'll be absolutely fine. You can actually put lacquers over acrylics. I've done it all the time, but no problem at all. Just to clip when cleaning out your airbrush at the end of the day, I always take the needle out and never take the nose off. Yeah, you can do it that way. And then he talks about the cleaner brushes. Just be careful with these types of dental cleaner ones in your nozzle, because they are very soft, they're brass, okay? But if you accidentally put one in and it tears it, because they're like a twisty sort of end, the way it holds the bristles, it can cause damage. That's why if you can, specifically just use a brush where the bristles are longer than the nozzle, so it just pushes down into it, or if you can, buy the ones that are designed for it, and you'll be absolutely fine. Jason says, can't wait to find out what I'm doing wrong. I've started airbrushing so far and I love it. I own the Badger Patriot and I'm waiting to learn how to use it to its fullest. As I say, next week it'll be more about it, guys, to be honest. Not airbrush related, so I won't listen. Did you get my photos on the ME262? Yes, I did. I've got pretty much all those photos, to be honest, because they're in that book. I think they're the same ones in that way as well. I can hear a loud notification ping on YouTube at the moment. Guess it's from the chat. Pass on that one, Jason. Shouldn't be. Then he also says, also, can compressors change the effect of the airbrush, e.g. a cheap eBay compressor without the tank versus a Sparmax 610? Like we said at the beginning, we were talking about it, technically all air compressors do exactly the same thing. They are literally just pushing out air, okay? Now, modern compressors, even the ones without a tank, don't have that bladder putt-putt problem, and that is the thing that used to plague the hobby 10, 20 years ago, is that you could buy them, they were known as a diaphragm compressor, and literally the way it pushed the air up was like a diaphragm just being pushed through, but that used to give pulses through the entire air hose, so you used to have out at the end, you could feel it, it's like put, put, put onto it, which was fine if you're doing something big, but if you were trying to do detailed work, it's pretty nasty. Modern ones though, I must admit, we don't really have that problem. They are a lot better, so from that point of view I think you're okay. So it just depends if you want to, you know, have that situation where you've got a nice one with a tank which is quieter in the long run. Normally I think I've got an air leak in there somewhere, I think I pulled the hose a bit earlier. Versus one that is always buzzing when it's running, okay? The thing is, when they're buzzing when they're running, they tend to get a bit hotter. These guys, they turn up, they fire up the pressure up, they get to 60 psi, I think that one is, and then it shuts off and it comes back online at 40, unless you've got it cranked up and wanting maximum psi, and then obviously as soon as you touch it, it will come back on. So from that point of view, you should be absolutely fine. But like everything, compressors, I think if you pay a certain amount, you'll have one that will last longer. You know, Steve's blew up the other week because he had a hole in it, but that's probably his fault, and I think he'd freely admit that himself because he's never cleaned it out. Okay, so you do need a little bit of maintenance. Clean out your compressor once a month. Just take it over to the sink with air in it and undo the valve slowly and just blow it all out the bottom. Okay, and then what you can do if you wanted to for the next sort of, you know, day, just leave the valve out and let it vent, and then pop it in, and you'll be absolutely fine. Michael says, Phil, I cannot get the air valve out of the bottom of my H&S airbrush. Any ideas? Get into it with a pair of pliers. To be honest, it's the old thing. I can show you on, actually, is it this one? Yeah, this is, I don't know if you can see it, this one has got battle scars. Okay, so what I tend to do is, you've got obviously this bit here. What I tend to do is, I'll put this in really tight, and then, see this one, it's just undoing this one. But I find if you do it quite tight and then give it a really good, he says, it's not going to do it now, but I tend to find if you tighten it up and then give it a damn good thing, you can then, it's not going to go, I'm going to be the same, there we go. So if you slightly over tighten the bottom one, I didn't think I was going to do it then, you can do it like that, okay? So that is it. But if you can, as I say, give that a slight over tighten, and then you should be able to work it the other way. You sort of over tighten one, and then the bottom one will come off, but that's how I've done it. But this one is always my problem one, and I don't know why. I don't know if this seal here on this one, it comes in the pack, you can change it as well. So if you want to whip that one, but you can see it's got a tooth mark in there. That's because I did have to resort to getting the pliers on it. I don't think you harm it. What you could do is bung a little bit of rubber, If you've got a piece of an old rubber glove or something, stick that around it and then give it a pull. But yeah, do as I did on that one, and now I can't undo that one. There we go. So managed to get that one off now. So yeah, over tighten if you've got something that can go on the bottom, and then a quick sharp drag. Because if you look at the thread on this one, okay, and then obviously if you look at the thread on these guys, as I say, it's always that thing when you try and demonstrate live on air. I can't that one off now. Okay, come on, one of them's going to go. No, they're all going to do it now. No, can't get that one off. But anyway, the thread difference is slightly different on them. Get one to come off would be alright today. No, can't do it. But yeah, that's the thing. Because the thing is, it would be handy if they did have a little cross slot in the bottom there and you could actually get it off. But don't pull on that bit, because obviously you'll ruin that bit. But if you put that one in there, then you can usually over tighten and pull back and you'll be good to go. Give that one a whirl, you'll be fine. Right, okay, is there a way to turn off the sound in the chat? It's quite annoying when you watch Phil live. Yeah, at the top there's a little X in above the thing, top left. As I'm looking at it now, there's a microphone. If you click that, it will turn off the actual sound and you'll be good to go. Neil says, missed the start of the stream, but did you go through the different types of hoses and hose attachments? Points, Badger ones of course are different for Hydra and Sneebeck. I did, I just mentioned about length of them, because obviously hoses at the end of the day are pretty much hoses, depending if you've got quick releases on them and everything else. You can obviously get braided ones, which to be honest, I have every particular type of hose I think that's ever been invented over the years, which live down in here. I think that could be a Badger one actually. But we've got one down here. You can get the ones which have the quick release already on them. That one's got a 1/4 inch adapter, I think that one is, or a 3/8. And then obviously this is the one I use, which is like fish pump hose. This you can physically feel it. When this stuff gets old, and I've been using it a while, this is so soft to the point of view where it really gets big. And the way you can tell is that if you try and fit this over the end, down here especially towards the ends of it, it gets really soft because it warms up as well, I think, with the heat, and it expands. And I was saying the only trouble with this type is that over time it can actually start to swell and get soft. So when you put 60 psi through this, it's got 60 psi in here and it pushes out, and as the pressure decreases, so does this as well. So it's not giving you a true reading between actually what it says on your regulator at your airbrush, sorry, on your air tank, to what it is actually at your airbrush because of this. Okay, so it can actually be a little bit of a false positive. But I'm not a massive fan of the braided ones, because the hose inside usually is just the black harder one than it is that, but you can't see what's going on. If I suddenly get something coming up through my airbrush, I will spot it. So that's just assuming it has happened before, that the moisture trap for whatever reason hasn't worked. If I can see water coming up this, and sometimes it might be just the tiniest amount, then I know we've got a problem, we can stop, we can blow it through, and away we go again. So I do prefer using the clear hose. Also, to be honest, for my environment, you can put it to whatever length you want. And this is proper hose. This is proper 1/4 inch 4B6, made in Germany. This is, what's it called? Ryanair or whatever it is. But it's actually Hydra and Steenbeck's own hose. You can buy it on a roll. But you buy it by the meter, and then that way you can work out exactly what you need. But it doesn't last forever. So from a length point of view, a braided one, I think they're tougher hoses and stuff like that. Right, so Michael's going to try and get his one off the end. Good luck with that. Okay, let me just refresh this one here. So David says, I recently purchased my first and only airbrush. It's the Iwata HPCH. The helpful bloke at the airbrush company told me I would never need to remove the nozzle. Iwata's literature says the same. I pull back the needle an inch and fire liquid reamer into the nozzle and it works fine. But should I ever removing it? The thing is, yeah, their airbrushes generally don't come apart as easy. You do need tools, and it's not as easy as the Hydra and Steenbeck ones, but sometimes it's nice to give them that proper clean out and all the rest of it. I've got liquid reamer down there. It comes in an aerosol can with a little nozzle on it, and you poke it in the end and you blast it and away you go. Really nice stuff, works an absolute treat, but I think with the Harder and Steenbeck ones, the reason I am attracted to them is they are so quick and easy. Like we did there, we had that trouble with the blockage. If you'd had that in the H&S airbrush, you'd have to back flush it and do various things to try and get it to go through. But even if you back flush it, where does it back flush it to? It's just going to back flush it down the back of the needle, and then it's going to come back and re-block up your nozzle. So from that point of view, I'd rather whip the nozzle off and just, you know, see it, right, there it is, rather than where's it gone, and I'm not sure. Again, it's personal preference. Don't get me wrong, when we've spoken about airbrushes before, I prefer the travel of the needle and the smoothness of the needle on most Iwata airbrushes over the Harder and Steenbeck. The Harder and Steenbeck, don't get me wrong, they're beautiful airbrushes, and you know, to the layman, I think if you're just pulling on a needle or, you know, on a trigger, on a nozzle, it doesn't make any difference. But to me, I don't know, perhaps I'm a bit of a connoisseur of it, but the Iwata ones are smoother. Also, there's a larger travel. The actual trigger distance is further on Iwata airbrushes than it actually is on the H&S airbrushes. But they roughly do the same thing at the end of the day, and I think it's that personal preference thing. But if I could take the needle travel and the glossiness feel and the more precision out of an Iwata and put it into the actual body and the ease of clean out and the ease of use of everything in a Harder and Steenbeck, I think that would be your ultimate airbrush. Really, really nice. But as I say, I've got airbrushes. We gave a load away the other day. Some nice ones, the ones that are better than this one the other day. You know, and it is that thing. I had a go with it. We reviewed it. It's a beautiful airbrush. It's fantastic. It's just for living with it, as far as I live with it, and the difference of paints that I go through and everything else. I think for, you know, for you guys perhaps have one sort of paint you always use, it's better. But with me, I might use acrylics one day. The next day, I'm using Tamiya. Then we've got lacquers going through it. Then we've got metallizers and everything else like that. It's easier just to get the nozzle out, give it a good squirt out. I can see daylight through it. I know I'm happy. Put it in and we're good to go. Okay, so Phil, need some advice cleaning the body of my H&S Ultra. I'm hesitant to soak it in lacquer thinners. Now, the thing is with the Ultra, the things you have to watch out for are, if we get this little guy all out down here, we can just show you, okay, is that it's not the same body as is in an Evo or any of the other ones. It's slightly different how this one all works and everything else, okay? Because technically this back part doesn't pull off as easy. It does come out, but you have to sort of unscrew. You have this little device down here and this one at the top, the way it goes through, okay? Then obviously you've got your nozzle area underneath. If you want to soak it, of course you can. You can actually just bung it in and away you go. Does this one come off? Yeah, it does, doesn't it? But if you wanted to soak it like that, just to give it a good proper clean up and everything else like that, then more than welcome. You'll have no problem at all, because all of these parts that are actually in here are fine, okay? And I do believe that it's actually, I can't see, yes I can, I'm pretty sure that down in there that is a Teflon seal as well. I think they changed them all to Teflon seals, okay? So you won't have a problem with it, okay? But yeah, you, as I say, with everything, as long as you clean it out, dry it afterwards and everything else, and you'll be good to go. But I do believe sometimes it is nice to give them a proper good strip down clean and a good like wash over and everything else, and you'll be good to go and absolutely fine. Just when you're popping this back in, just make sure you have it seated correctly and this back part drop down, okay? So then when this comes back in, it should all just screw in the back, literally like that. Have we missed it? Yeah, see, we missed it. So you need to make sure, if I get this off of here correctly. There is another way to do this. You can actually do it slightly separate. What you want to do is just make sure that this back piece is laying flat down, just like that, okay? Because if it's not laying down, hold on, I'll wait for you. If it's not laying down flat, then this part at the back will not go in. And also you need the square nut to slide into the body part, okay? So that goes in there like that. Then you can put your nozzle needle assembly together, okay? Chuck back in like that, okay? Needle goes through, little tap on the front. Remember, don't over tighten anything. This back one, make sure that's always tight in there, okay? That one goes in there. Air valve on. Okay, and you'll be good to go. All again, no problem at all. Okay, straightforward like that. But yeah, most airbrushes, in fact, all the ones I use, I would soak them. They're fine. You shouldn't really need to soak them. They should be absolutely fine. Right. Okay. Thanks, Bill. It's much better without the sound. Can you do it with the chat too? Your mic catches the sound. You shouldn't be hearing mine because mine's off. I've turned mine is off, isn't it? I have my volume right off of everything. Unless you're watching this as a recording and then it wasn't in the early part, of course. Right, okay, so Neil says, is there a reason why you seldom use the lid on your colour cup? I've seen you want, yeah, to be honest, it's to show you guys how much paint I'm using. It's because we have the overhead camera, I think you can see exactly how much paint I'm using and the consistency of it and everything from the top. That's why I always used to never put a colour cup on. I do though now a lot of the times. I didn't today either because I wanted you guys to see the paint so you can see how much it's going down and everything else like that. Quick note as well, if you've ever got that thing where you've got no paint but you've got air and you just can't work out what's going on, make sure that the hole on the top of your colour cups are open, so it doesn't take much. You just take a cocktail stick and stab it. Okay, but again, I've had people say I can't get it out, and then I was like, well, because it can't siphon because it's in a vacuum. So just pop a cocktail stick in these little guys and make sure they're clear. And again, because they all have them, but sometimes you can like rock the paint and then it covers it and then it dries, and then you're in a situation where obviously you get no air can get through and to allow gravity to come through. Because what happens is it siphons out and then it's a vacuum in there, and it just stays in there because it can't pull through. So make sure that they're totally clear. But again, it's just to show you guys. A lot of the time when I'm not filming, I have a colour cup top on. Stephen, why do you sometimes get air coming out of the airbrush after you release the trigger? Maybe this for half a second. Normally what it is because the seal that is in the back of the body, okay, so it's this part down in here, is squashed a little bit heavy, and it can cause travel on as the actual needle is pushing forward as well, okay. So also what can happen is that if you have on single action airbrushes, obviously this one at the top, okay, so I don't know if I can make this guy do it. Let me see if I can get it to do it. No, hold on. If I get one and over tighten it, then I might be able to show you some run on. It's always the way, when you want one to do it, it will never do it. That would be a good one to show you next week because it's jamming. What can happen is, let me just try and get one to do it. We've already, I think this one should do it. What can happen, it's really annoying when you can't get one to do it. Right, okay. Okay, well I can't get it to do it, but I'll show you. What can happen is, I've got to try and get one of these off now. Which one did we get off? Get it all off. We were saying about trying to get these bottom bits off. Hold on with your airbrush. Hold on, let's try one of these. Okay. I believe I can't get mine to do it today. Normally I can get one to do it. What happens is if you've got the air stem, this guy here, and it's too tight, as in this is over tight in this bottom one, it can actually make a pinch as the actual seal goes up to the body. So the actual needle, as it's pushing down, gets trapped a little bit, and it's not as sharp as it can do when it pulls up. So I don't know if I can get this one to sort of do it a little bit here. Okay, so if we just sort of see if we can get it to unslacken that. Too much. This is what we were doing the other day, and you can get run on. There we go. Can't get it to do it now of all things. Sorry, it's one of those things. It never does when you need it. But what can happen is it can actually pinch at the top, and it's actually what it is. It's causing pressure, so this cannot physically pop up. And also, if your spring underneath is too slack, if this is undone too much, what can happen is there's not enough pressure to push it back up to turn it off. So, like on this guy, if we amazingly, it's not going to do it today, but obviously always the way. But yeah, that's what it is. So if you've got the old-fashioned one as well, which actually has the rubber O-ring at the top, that can cause you ultra-ups. Switch it for a Teflon one. It's very rare you get the Teflon ones to do it. But to be honest, this guy used to do it all the time. If this was over-tightened, you know, you'd have this one right done up, and the air stem itself, it just physically wouldn't let go. Okay, so you know what? It's going to really annoy me. I can't get one of these to pop off the bottom. Hold on, let's try the old blue tack trick. Okay. Right. No, got you, bugger. Blue tack. We're out for everything. Okay. So, but yeah, this little guy up here, this little, what it is, when it's running on, the little nipple at the top here is literally just not dropping properly. So check it for bounciness. Give it a little bit of lube as well, a little bit of super lube or needle juice as well, just on there. That'll help that, and it'll stop the trigger from physically running on, so your air carries on for like half a second or something else afterwards. Okay, but that's what it can be. But if you have got the old one, you might see down in there got the red. That's the paint from the actual the Teflon seal. It has writing on it sometimes, and you can see down in there. And also you might see that little hole on the side. That's where your air goes. Okay, as it makes its way up. But yes, that is literally it. But if it's too slack underneath, if this is undone too much, then what can happen is that it's not enough to push that trigger back up and just to turn the air off properly, if you know what I mean. So that's where it can all come to. That's probably going to be too loose now. As I say, it's really annoying when it normally does it and I can get it to do it, but it's not today, because they're all pretty good. They're all pretty operational and working well. Right, Peter says, just a quick thing, the Iwata Eclipse, as far as the sensible clunky nozzle that floats in the tapered hull, it doesn't screw. Yeah, this is what this one is, which I think, if I remember rightly. Yeah, this actually, what it is, this one has I don't know what I've done with my wrenches and things for this particular thing, so we'll just go old school. Don't look, everybody. Okay, look, this one, it's slightly different. Again, this is quite good because it shows you all the different sizes. My worry always with all of these is that with the Iwata airbrushes, sometimes this is a sealed one-piece unit, so you physically, once this rounds off, if you can't get this tiny little nozzle off the end, you've had it, because you used to have to send the entire thing back to have this bit replaced. But now they actually do a floating version, and this one just sits in and floats, so you can have that entire part as a replacement part if you wanted to. Okay, but normally, like all the other airbrushes, as you'll see, it's literally, the nozzle is just this tiny little silver bit at the end, obviously versus an H&S one, which is like, you know, sort of huge in comparison. Alright, but this guy literally sits in here and it floats. There's no proper screw, but you've still got a screw. Technically, the nozzle is still on the end. So if you round that off by mistake or whatever, it is a bit of a problem trying to get all that back in. I'll get that to sit in there, paint falling out of this. To be honest, as you can probably see, I tend to use this particular airbrush purely for doing all the metallics, metallizers, stuff like that, because it works so well. But yeah, that's the difference between that one and obviously the H&S ones. But not all of them have that floating end, because obviously when you look at the old-fashioned, get this end off, on the Neo, that's normally how they are, so this physically doesn't come off. And again, there's your nozzle just on the very end there, on that square. So you actually have a tiny little tool when you unscrew it and you take it off, and you do it that way. But if you round that off, or you chew up this little bit of brass, that was always the problem. Whereas you say, when you're dealing with the H&S airbrushes, because they are literally just as simple as that, there's nothing to it. There's no complicated bits or anything that you can't do by hand, and everything else like that. So that's why, to be honest, I quite like them. It just fits my style, and I suppose the amount of wear and tear and everything else that we go through with these, it just makes things a lot easier for me to do, change things on the fly, and if I bend and break things, I can just have repairs, you know, and spares here, which is just a 2-minute job, versus other things where perhaps it might take me a couple of weeks to get an airbrush repaired or sent back or something else like that. So it is just personal, you know, choice on all these things. Is having a separate airbrush for lacquers and acrylics and varnishes coach recommended, or is it a luxury? It's definitely a luxury, he says, surrounded by airbrushes, but if you can, I do. And like I was saying just then, I tend to use the Iwata, say this is my HPCS, purely for doing all the metallic type stuff. So any of the more lacquer ones, to be honest, I don't tend to use it with AK's Extreme Metals, because they're like an enamel based ones. But if I'm spraying anything proper type lacquers like Alclads and all stuff like those ones, then I use this particular one. Because sometimes as well, contamination, you know, silvers and stuff, you don't need it in your flat, you know, olive drab. So from that point of view, I think it's really handy to have something else like that. Okay, so I know a lot of people have like cheaper ones, like these guys as well. This is the Neo. It's the Neo. I can't remember what they call it now. They don't even write it on the airbrush. It's devoid of anything whatsoever. But yeah, it's the Neo one with the trigger. I know a lot of people use these purely for doing clear coats, you know, and that's all they put through it and everything else like that. So you can just do it from that point of view, popping that through. If you can afford it, I think it's a very nice thing to have. If you can't, I wouldn't worry about it. I wouldn't lose sleep about it. It just means you've got to clean out your airbrush perhaps a little bit better between doing different things. So if you have lacquers going through it, make sure it's been properly cleaned all the way through. Then go in after it with something like an acrylic airbrush cleaner. Make sure it's flowing well with that before you put acrylic paint in it. Because if you've got any trace of lacquer in there, you know it's going to thicken up the actual thing and cause you troubles. So it just makes things a bit easier if you have got one. And to be honest, this is why my two Infinities here, they're identical, okay? But literally this one has a bit of tape around it. It's because this one I use for acrylics, this one I use for the Mr. Paint, which I know tonight we didn't. We used this one. That's I think why it coughed a little bit, because it's used to having lacquer paint through it. But usually it's if it's acrylics, it's this one here. So again, it purely is that thing. Right, okay, let me just check these around, and I think that will do us for tonight, gentlemen, if everybody's happy with that one. That one's all good. I think you're all good in the chat. I think the chat worked very well tonight. Hopefully you're all okay with that one. I like the way you're all joining now and everything else. Though the viewer things dropped down. We're down to 185. Okay, so yeah, that's about it. Thank you for joining me. I know tonight was a little bit of a rush. I think I probably tried to cover too much in the space of an hour and a bit, but hopefully I can answer your questions on the fly. Next week I will make it a little bit more sensible, and we'll just go through the stages. So next week what we're going to be talking about is obviously colour mixes. So we will use 3 different types of paint. So we will use technically an enamel, I have got some, we use an acrylic like Vallejo, something else like that, and we use a lacquer based one by MRP, and we'll show you the differences between all 3, and then we'll show you the different styles of using it, because each one does have its own style and its actual thing like that. So again, if you've got any questions, post them up, and then obviously what we do is probably this type of format as well. So afterwards, any questions, just shout, and then obviously we can answer them live whilst I've got everything out here and everything else like that. One just come in. I've got a custom Micron CMC, and I was told that removing the nozzle can disturb the calibration. Is this true? Technically what they're saying is that, and it's true, all of the, well, to be honest, everybody, I think most airbrush companies do it. I know Harder and Steenbeck do. They used to come with a little chart that says it passed everything, but they are checked in the factory to make sure that the spray pattern is perfect and everything else like that. Then they clean them through. I know Harder and Steenbeck do. I've seen the video on them doing it. So each airbrush is checked before it goes out. So what they're saying is, I think if you're going to be like changing parts out, that it's going to void that particular bit of it. Does it? I don't know. Technically, if you're just replacing like for like, I can't imagine it making too much of a difference, because all you do is replacing a nozzle with a new one or something else like that. Nozzles by their nature don't last forever. They are going to wear out. I go through nozzles a lot. Again, a lot of it is me. It's bad practice. I'm an animal with them and everything else. The Iwata, to be honest, I've had a new nozzle in that one because it's got the 0.35 needle in that one, and I bought a new nozzle for it purely because I just noticed the pattern. I was getting that chiseled effect we were saying, so when I was going up it was a nice thin line, but when I go sideways it's quite wide, so I replaced it. So again, I think it's just one of those things. Sometimes I think they would prefer you to send it back. You know, I know they come with a great warranty and everything else, the Iwata brushes, but again, it's personal choice. I wouldn't worry. If you're out of warranty, as in, you know, it's over a year old and you're going to change parts on it, what can go wrong at the end of the day? You're just replacing like for like. So really, I wouldn't worry about it. So you'll be fine. So, last little dance round before I leave you all. Okay, so that one is all good. So if we're all good and done in the chat then, guys, thank you very much for joining me tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure. Let me know how you think. How do you think this went? Was it nice to have the interaction on the fly straight away? Or is it better just to have the questions and then shout them out as we've done it before? As I say, it's totally up to you. I know we had some thing with the noises and the pings and the various things, but hopefully we've sorted that now. I keep my eye on it. I've got both of them running me next to me, so we'll be absolutely fine. Okay, one just come in. I've got the Mr. Hobby Procon Platinum with a 0.3 needle. This is my first airbrush and I love it. It has a pressure valve built in. Nice feature. Very nice. The thing is, you can, you know, like I usually say, I know the Harder and Steenbeck airbrush range. You can buy different bits and add them on. You can have it with the Mac valve built into it, so you can actually adjust it on the fly and on the back if you wanted to. Each manufacturer, but honestly, if like you're saying, if you love the feature and you get on really well with the airbrush, stick with it. Don't even think about changing, you know, because it is that thing. I can pick up pretty much any airbrush and I can lay down paint. That's not a problem. But if I want to do something specific, I have my favourites, and as you say, I like my Infinity. But again, the Iwata for doing metallizer work and stuff like that, absolutely beautiful. It lays down a fantastic coat and it goes down beautifully, and I never have any problems with it stopping, starting, spitting and all those things that you can get with some types of acrylic paints and stuff like that. So again, it is that thing, it's personal choice. I know guys who love badgers, basic badger ones or really expensive ones. You can get obviously the, you know, the passion brushes and everything else like that. You know, so it is that thing. They are literally like cars. You'll get people who've had no problems and they've had an airbrush for the last 50 years handed down from great granny, and they love it. Brilliant. Stick with it. Never be sort of swayed into taking a new airbrush just because somebody says it's the newest, greatest thing. I'm hopefully going to explain with you and get rid of that sort of, you know, stigma about, you know, things have to be a certain way. No, everything just atomizes paint. That's all it does. It's just they do it slightly differently, each one. Okay, first ever visit to the chat room. Had a giggle and got my questions answered. Great stuff. No problem, David. Lovely to have you here. Neil was using the chat, made the course go from great to excellent. It was really helped and added a huge amount of value to the live stream. Thank you. I think it has as well. I've actually loved it. It's been a blast, actually. In some ways, it's easier doing that than it is reading questions, because sometimes you know the questions are coming, so you sort of preempt them and stuff like that. With this, I haven't got a clue what you're all up to. Who knows what you're doing there? Anyway, it's gone my bedtime by a long time, so I'm going to have to leave you all now. So thank you very much, as I say. Great time. Same time next week, everybody. Although I might start a bit earlier if that's all alright, but let me know. Again, your thing. Let me know what you want and I'll get it all sorted and done for you. So, there we go. Right. No problem, guys. Absolutely fine. Right, I am off. I've got to go. Thing is, I don't even know what the outro thing is these days or anything else like that. I don't even know where any of them are because we keep changing all the settings on this. I need to get them all sorted. Right, where's the little button up here? Come on, there we go. Right, thank you very much for joining me, guys. I'll catch you all tomorrow. Obviously it's Friday, so we'll be having a look around the forum and all the other bits and trying to pick out some of your great work to actually showcase in there. And then hopefully also I'll have the reveal done for the A10 warts and all reveal as well. I haven't started it yet, but I will do it in the morning and work our way through just like that. And then I'm going to get the primer coat with any luck onto the actual Tiger as well. So we want to get that one done so it's all ready for painting next week. So there we go. Thanks a lot, guys, and I'll catch you all tomorrow.